Dragon Tamer. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 226, Poisoning Technique, Black Willow Snake. No wonder. Liu Ming's shock was palpable. No wonder the natives of this world possessed such astonishing physical strength. During his time in this world, he had also discovered something. Compared to the transcendent beings on Earth, the powerful individuals in this world possessed relatively few innate abilities and control over their strength. Their abilities, power, and agility were not particularly strong. However, their physical strength, power, and agility far surpassed those of the transcendent beings on Earth. It was like possessing brute force without being able to fully utilize it. Now everything made sense. The evolutionary chart. It had to be the evolutionary chart. What was the evolutionary chart? Following his own path of cultivation on Earth, once he broke the third divine gene chain, he would enter the third stage of yuan qi cultivation, the explosive energy shaping stage. This stage of cultivation focused primarily on the physical energy, and he would encounter the evolutionary chart, also known as the body shaping chart. Each of the 4 levels of the explosive energy shaping stage, the bronze, silver, and gold bodies, and finally the perfect body, had a corresponding evolutionary chart. And this leather book actually depicted the evolutionary diagram directly on it. Through this so-called night training method, one could begin the transformation of mortal body into a transcendental form through the transfiguration evolution. This was simply incredible. Although these evolutionary diagrams were much simpler and less efficient than those of the third stage transfiguration evolution, they were essentially the same. The natives of this world had already begun their physical evolution at the first stage. How could their physical fitness not be strong? How could it not be astonishing? After putting down the leather book, Liu Ming immediately had an idea: to obtain a training method as soon as possible. Even a weakened transfiguration body was fundamentally different from a mortal flesh and blood body. One of the characteristics of a transfiguration body was its extremely strong resilience and cellular activity. Even injuries that would be fatal in the eyes of ordinary people would heal rapidly due to the powerful cellular activity. But wait, don't get too excited just yet. The training methods of this world might not be suitable for you. After all, even if your appearance was the same as this, who knew if your body structure was different? Their training methods might not be suitable for you. However, it would be a good reference. The secret book of primordial key doesn't contain a physical evolutionary map. Instead, it's imprinted within the essence of life. Once the secret book and the practitioner become one, the evolutionary map applies only to that individual practitioner. However, the training methods of this world are universally applicable, and this is their greatest advantage. This method of materializing the physical evolutionary energy map within a cortical book deeply astounded Liu Ming. This meant that the secret book of primordial key couldn't be widely disseminated, but the training methods could. The problem was, the training methods were prohibitively expensive, 40,000 azure coins, and his weapon was only worth a few azure coins. The price of one training method could buy dozens or even hundreds of some K3 jet rifles. Reluctantly, he put down the rock-heavy rock fist, a volume so expensive that he couldn't even consider it. He turned and left. Afterward, Liu Ming searched the trading area, but didn't see anyone else selling training methods. However, while wandering around, he did discover another place offering training methods. At the service counter in the commission hall, there were numerous booklets listing items for redemption, including no fewer than 10 secret training methods. The lowest exchange requirement was only 300 azure coins. During the Dark Knight Forest journey, all the spoils had been sold off by the Warframe team members. At the Warframe team base, after the haul was distributed, Liu Ming received a copy. Although he had absorbed the most valuable Blood Eagle pronucleus, he owed the Warframe team 2,000 azure coins. However, his summoned servant's outstanding performance during the second half of the Dark Knight Forest journey ensured everyone reached base safely. So, after discussion, Osei and the others decided to pay him a reward up front. As a result, Liu Ming had just over 300 azure coins on hand. When exchanging the training methods, he didn't dare reveal his telepathic abilities. Ultimately, he obtained the training methods through a flurry of sign language. The painful process only strengthened his resolve to master the world's language and achieve basic communication. Hordes poisoning technique. That's the name of this training method. Based on the level of training, it should be considered a beginner knight's training method. Theoretically, Hordes poison tempering technique is sufficient to train an ordinary person from the initial stage of transcendence, a quasi-knight, all the way to the beginner knight level. However, its exchange price is lower than the formal knight training methods of the next level below. The reason is that this training method is extremely dangerous and unstable. As the name suggests, poison tempering involves tempering various highly irritating toxins to stimulate the body's resistance mechanisms. Then, through specialized training, the ultimate goal is to strengthen the physique and evolve the body. Almost every evolutionary chart included in the training method is related to a specific toxin, and it is clearly noted. The slightest carelessness in practice can easily lead to fatal poisoning. However, Liu Ming completely ignored these shortcomings. Since his King Ming Yuan Qi was infused with the power of the evil dragon, his body's resistance to various toxins has greatly increased. This resistance is reflected in his body. Even though his extraordinary powers have been suppressed, his physical fitness remains as strong as ever. So, with this reassurance, he chose the training method with little worry. However, the only problem currently troubling him was that he couldn't understand the text on the training method, let alone practice it. Inside a simple black stone house, nestled among the low buildings near the city walls of the Night Fortress, an elderly man explained to a young man, seemingly listening intently, "Mute, that's a term. Black Quiro, a relatively weak rotten beast in the forest, but its venom is terrifying. Even many junior knights are reluctant to provoke it unless absolutely necessary. Thank you, Mr. Benzes, for your guidance over the past 10 days. Here's your reward." The young man seemed pleased with the answer, pulling out a few azure coins and preparing to leave. This young man was Liu Ming, who had purchased the training method a dozen days ago and was at a loss as to how to practice it, having been unable to understand the instructions. As he was about to return to the Warframe Squad's base, he happened to meet the retired hunter named Benzes. Benzes suffered a broken leg and arm while on a mission, completely ending his hunting career. Having lived in the Night Fortress for over a decade, he had no friends or relatives in the city, so he decided to stay. Within the Night Fortress, he enjoyed his retirement by working as a cashier at a shop. In his spare time, he spent his days drinking and living a carefree life. When Liu Ming first encountered him, he had just left a bar, still drunk and acting recklessly. His drunken behavior had offended a few passing hunters, leading to a beating. When Liu Ming arrived, Benzes' drunken stupor had sobered him up, accompanied by the intense pain. Covered in blood and unable to even crawl, he desperately begged Liu Ming to take him to the infirmary. Liu Ming reconsidered, agreed, and took the opportunity to begin studying the language of this world with him. This was already the 16th day of his study. He had already translated most of the training method and was ready to begin his training. This time, he was asking Benzes about the first special formula combined with exercise, the main ingredient of the Black Quiro reagent. Hordes poison technique. This bizarre training method involves almost every step involving a stimulating poison formula. It relies entirely on drugs to cultivate. Without the stimulating agents, the body wouldn't receive the necessary response, and relying solely on physical exercise would result in virtually no progress. Chapter 227, Pharmacist, Venom Configuration. The East District of the Night Fortress. This is where nearly 10,000 residents of the entire Night Fortress come to trade special items. The entire Night Forest forward base has over 8,000 adventurers and hunters, and with the garrison and accompanying personnel, the total population exceeds 10,000. This is almost the size of a small town. The East District trading market is one of the busiest places in the entire Night Fortress. The reason why Liu Ming came directly here after leaving Benzes' residence was because of the advice Benzes had given him before leaving. If you need a black quill snake, I suggest you go to the East District trading market. There are many hunters and adventurers selling strange and unusual items there. Holding a simple drawing of a black quill snake drawn by Benzes in hand, Liu Ming quickly found this snake as he walked and looked. A man carrying a cage filled with several hideous black snakes shouted to passers-by, "Black Quero snakes. Their venom is a highly potent nerve-paralyzing toxin, making them perfect for poisoning arrows and blades. Excellent value and affordable." Liu Ming compared the simple drawing with the other and approached. A moment later, he left the market carrying a coarse linen bag containing a black snake. The snake was only about 3 elbows long, and despite its small size, it was undeniably ferocious. Its jet black scales were dotted with dark red oval patterns, like individual pupils scattered across the scales, enough to make those with trypophobia nauseous. 2 rows of 6 stubby fangs, each of varying sizes, jutted from its snout, and a irregular tumor atop its head. Of course, despite its ferocious appearance, it held no threat. For all the black Quero snakes were already dead. While there were no visible wounds, it was undoubtedly dead. According to the seller, he had destroyed the hearts of these black Queris, rendering them completely dead and posing no threat. After spending over 10 azure coins to purchase the black Queris and gathering the other ingredients needed to create the venom, Liu Ming headed straight for the central area of the Wall of Night. Despite purchasing all the ingredients, he still couldn't quite formulate the poison. Based on what he'd learned over the past few days, he decided to seek out someone and ask them to complete the potion, known as the Serpent's Kiss. Liu Ming knocked on the door of a charming, single-family building in the central area. "Who are you looking for?" A man, clearly a servant, opened the door and looked at him with a puzzled expression. Liu Ming smiled and said, "I'm looking for Scholar Fezzer." "Name? Do you have an appointment?" the servant asked business-like. Liu Ming, of course, didn't have one, but he simply handed him a small cloth bag. The servant opened the bag, revealing a dazzling azure sheen. He carefully weighed the bag, then calmly accepted it. Then, with a beaming smile, he looked at Liu Ming and said, "I'll go in and ask for permission. If the scholar agrees to see you, just say you're a distant relative." After a moment's wait, a servant led Liu Ming inside. In the living room on the first floor, Liu Ming met the renowned scholar of the Night Fortress, Fess, a member of the Jerry Town Scholar's Castle and a master of alchemy, was a well-dressed middle-aged man with meticulously combed, graying hair. He leaned back on the leather sofa, looked at Liu Ming and said calmly, "I heard you're Paul's distant nephew?" "Yes," Liu Ming nodded. "Well, tell me, young man, what do you want from me? Considering Paul's years of service, if your request isn't difficult to fulfill, I might consider granting it." Fess's promise delighted Liu Ming, who felt his dozens of azure coins had paid off. On his own, he couldn't convince the master of alchemy to agree to his request. After all, according to this world's ethos, scholars are the ultimate elite, and the man before him wasn't just any scholar, but a senior scholar. Unlike high-ranking knights like Osei and Hogwarts, this senior scholar's status within the entire Night Fortress rivaled that of Wolf Sword Cuman, the guardian of the Night Forest base. "Sir, I request that you prepare this potion for me," Liu Ming said, handing over the recipe for the Serpent's Kiss, which he had memorized. This was the first recipe recorded in Hogwarts poison technique. The main ingredient was the venom of the black Quero snake. Fess glanced at the recipe, a strange emotion flashing in his eyes. He asked, "Serpent's Kiss? Is this the recipe for Serpent's Kiss?" Liu Ming didn't answer, but his surprised expression almost confirmed it. He hadn't expected the master potionist to recognize the recipe so easily, which only contained the ingredients and the preparation process. Unfazed by Liu Ming's silence, Fess spoke up. "Don't be surprised, young man. The Serpent's Kiss potion is suitable for beginners of most poison tempering techniques. However, this Serpent's Kiss, using the black Quero snake as a main ingredient, is likely derived from Hogwarts poison tempering technique." His revelation of the training method he was preparing to practice in one sentence made Liu Ming even more impressed by the alchemist's expertise. "How are your ingredients going?" the alchemist asked. Liu Ming immediately opened his sack and another, revealing the contents. "Sir, I have prepared the main and auxiliary ingredients." "Very good. Come pick them up tomorrow." Fess reviewed the ingredients and nodded to Liu Ming. "Thank you very much, sir." Liu Ming was somewhat surprised. He hadn't expected this supposedly aloof scholar to agree to his request so readily. After Liu Ming left the gate, Fessor calmly asked his servant, Pool, do you know why I agreed to prepare the potion for him? Master, because he's my distant nephew? Pool replied uncertainly. Fessor laughed heartily, as if he had just heard a ridiculous joke. Haha, distant nephew. Pool, over the years, I've had at least 50 of your so-called distant relatives ask you to do things for me, if not 100. Hearing this, Pool's forehead immediately broke out in a bead of sweat. He hadn't expected his master to have known all about his money-making schemes. I agreed to it because of Howard's poison technique. Howard's poison technique is the work of my teacher, Howard Reus. With that, Fessor left the terrified servant and went upstairs. The second floor held Fessor's bedroom and study, along with several guest rooms. The third floor consisted of a single room, a large room with a completely broken wall. It was this floor he had gone to. Inside, there were more than 10 lab benches. The lab table was filled with various glass, stone, and metal containers. Fessor dumped the black Quero snake and all the materials onto an empty lab table. He put on white rubber gloves and pulled a small silver knife from a small box. He gently cut off the tumor on the black Quero snake's head and placed it in a glass container nearby. Unlike other snakes, the black Quero snake's venom sac is this tumor on its head. After removing the tumor, he opened a glass bottle and poured some viscous black liquid onto the tumor, just enough to cover it, and then he plugged it with a cork. As he processed the materials, he muttered to himself with a nostalgic look on his face, "Teacher, I didn't expect that after all these years, there are still people trying to practice your poison tempering technique. Although this training method was rejected by the Scholar Castle many years ago, I still believe that your wisdom is correct. There must be a balance between even the most powerful toxins and the body's resistance mechanisms. By mastering this balance, you can improve your body's functions in the face of toxins." Chapter 228, First Poisoning, Physical Fitness Soars. The next morning, Liu Ming finished breakfast and went to Fisei's residence. The so-called breakfast consisted of a coarse grain pancake that was incredibly difficult to chew, let alone taste. Furthermore, he had been anticipating the serpent's kiss for the entire night, so he swallowed his breakfast hastily, barely satisfying his hunger. In the central area, on the main street, the middle-aged servant opened the door again. However, this servant, seemingly named Pool, had lost the bright smile he had shown the day before when he accepted the azure coin. Instead, he held a coldness and a hint of hostility. Liu Ming marveled at the man's rapid change of expression, but he didn't mind it. The underlying hostility puzzled him. Was he blaming him for not paying him today? However, Liu Ming certainly didn't intend to pay the servant again. He had very few azure coins left. After entering, Fisei was just approaching the spiral staircase. He was coming downstairs carrying 2 large glass bottles, each as thick as a bowl, likely containing several liters of liquid. "The serpent's kiss is ready. Take it. The art of poisoning is not easy. I hope you succeed. If you succeed, feel free to come back to me to make venom." After handing the bottles to Liu Ming and making a promise, Fisei said nothing more and went back upstairs. The servant looked stunned at the promise, and Liu Ming was also quite surprised. Liu Ming took the bottles and felt a slight heaviness. Liquid could be faintly seen rippling within the dark brown bottles. Each weighed at least 3 or 4 kilograms. As Fisei's servant thanked him, he was about to leave when Fisei's voice reached him from afar. "Remember, the serpent's kiss made with black Quero's venom must not be exposed to strong light, otherwise the toxin will evaporate." Liu Ming, who had just left, cursed inwardly. "Damn it. Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Outside, the sun was shining brightly. With no other options, he stuffed the 2 bottles of potion into his cloak. Like a pregnant woman in her 10th month, he clutched 2 knee-high glass bottles and swayed towards his residence on the eastern side of the night fortress. Upon returning to the Warframe Squad's quarters, the Warframe Squad members couldn't help but stare at Liu Ming, who had just entered with a strange gait. Liu Ming ignored their strange looks and went straight upstairs. Placing the 2 glass bottles on the table in the room, he unscrewed the cap of one. The dark glass bottle contained an unusually viscous black liquid. Following Howard's poisoning technique, Liu Ming used a pre-prepared container to remove a small half bowl of the slime from the bottle. He poured it into a tub in the bathroom, then filled it halfway with boiling hot water. The black slime rapidly diluted, and the clear water gradually turned a murky black. As the blackness slowly spread, burying the entire tub, Liu Ming undressed and stepped into the tub. As soon as his skin came close to the poison-filled potion, Liu Ming felt a searing sting radiate from his skin to his pain-sensing nerves. Like being licked by fire, or having salt sprinkled on a wound. The intense pain surged. But this little pain wasn't much of a concern. With a splash, the water slammed, and Liu Ming was completely submerged in the tub. Except for his head, his entire body was immersed in the potion. In the no longer scalding water, his skin slowly turned red, like a boiled lobster. The excruciating pain intensified. From the initial contact with a small patch of skin to a burning sting that pierced every pore of his body, Liu Ming closed his eyes. Gradually, he realized that, in addition to the intense stinging pain, his muscles were also twitching and trembling under the effects of the potion. As the stinging intensified, the frequency of the muscle tremors increased. His head, the only part not submerged in the water, began to sweat profusely. Time ticked by, and then a crisp clang echoed from the bedroom. He suddenly rose from the tub. Just before he began his soak, Liu Ming had used a pendulum clock to set the estimated time. According to the description of the poison tempering technique, the first soak was long enough. Next, it was time to begin training. While immersed in the potion, his muscles and skin had been fighting the toxins while they were being eroded. Now, after resisting the toxins, his body was exhausted and hungry. If he trained at this time, the intense feeling of exhaustion and hunger would easily push his body past its previous limits. Punching and kicking with vigor, Liu Ming felt as if all his strength was being squeezed out. With Liu Ming's physique, with ordinary training, he might have needed a full day to feel even a slight sense of fatigue. But after soaking in the potion, the exhaustion washed over him like a tide as he emerged. Training amidst exhaustion, the feeling of pushing one's limits was palpable and clear. When one reaches the limits of one's body, while not completely depleted, the body's functions faltered like a machine running out of fuel. Liu Ming had no choice but to stop. After a short rest, feeling his strength restored, and his fatigue largely dissipated, he would soak in the potion again, and begin his training. He continued this cycle throughout the day. As dusk fell, night fell. After a day of sweating in his room, Liu Ming clenched his fists and muttered, "I feel like my strength and physique have improved. This training method is incredibly effective. Let's see how strong I am." The War Armor Squad's quarters were spacious, like Liu Ming's. Besides the bedroom and bathroom, there was a large balcony with a floor-to-ceiling sandbag in front. This was a solid sandbag wrapped in several thick layers of iron sheeting and filled with iron sand. Ordinary sandbags simply couldn't withstand the blows of a transcendent. This special sandbag, however, was not only resistant to the transcendent's blows, but also had the ability to automatically recover if dented. Bang! A punch landed firmly on the sandbag, leaving a deep fist mark. A flicker of shock crossed Liu Ming's eyes. He had previously used this specially made sandbag to test his punching power, but the force of his blows was only 3/3 of what it was now. In other words, his strength had increased by a third in just one day. He threw hundreds of punches with all his might, completely denting the sandbag and struggling to recover. Yet, Liu Ming didn't even draw a breath. Waiting for the sandbag to heal, he closed his eyes and felt it. His physical fitness had also improved significantly, at least by a small amount. Given his basic physique, such an improvement after this training was truly astonishing. After all, he already had the physique of a full knight. Amazing! He exclaimed slowly, taking a deep breath. He couldn't tell if it was the magnitude of the improvement, his own punching power, the training method, or the venom prepared by the Pfizer scholars, or perhaps all four. He had reason to believe that ordinary people wouldn't have the same frenzied and relentless training, nor the repeated immersion in the venom until the very last second. Or perhaps he could have found an ordinary pharmacist to prepare the venom, rather than a master pharmacist like Pfizer. He probably wouldn't have achieved the same astonishing results. There were quite a few pharmacists throughout the Night Fortress. It could even be described as numerous. Within the entire base of 10,000 people, there were over 100 registered pharmacists. This ratio was unusually high for a forward base. Of course, there was a reason for this, and Liu Ming happened to know it. The Night Forest. This perilous forest was a pharmacist's paradise. Its countless medicines and various potion ingredients attracted a steady stream of pharmacists. Even Fezzer, the pharmacist from the Scholar's Castle, came to the Night Forest under these circumstances. Chapter 229. Half a year in a flash. The name of the Blood Beast. The Blood and Firethorn Tavern was the most popular tavern among hunters in the entire Dark Fortress. Almost all hunter teams returning from quests came here for a gathering, as the owner of this tavern was the highest official of the Hunter Guild stationed in Dark Fortress. It was the dead of winter, the coldest day on the Holy White Mercer Plateau. Even the Dark Fortress hunters rarely went on quests in such weather. Yet, the Blood and Firethorn Tavern was bustling with activity. A fire roared in the fireplace. The warmth of the flames, the strong liquor, and the voluptuous dance filled the tavern. Suddenly, the curtains of the tavern were lifted, and a biting cold wind blew in, carrying snowflakes in. Just as the hunters near the door were about to burst into curses, a group of more than a dozen people filed in. As the first few stepped into the tavern, the hunters, shaken by the cold wind, suddenly stopped, swallowing the curses that were on their lips. They were startled awake from their drunken state, as if they had just nearly offended some sinister spirit. Mute, it's all thanks to you that we escaped unscathed this time. I owe you another life, the bearded leader said to another companion, whose entire face was hidden by a hood, revealing only a similarly bearded chin. His tone was filled with gratitude. Yes, if it weren't for your summoned minions fighting to hold back the herd, the devourer would have surely slaughtered us one by one. What a shame, your minions suffered heavy losses. Each of the group thanked the man. He waved his hand, indicating no need for further thanks. It's okay. Now that the blood beast is gone, you can summon it again. As he spoke, he removed his hood, revealing a familiar face. Liu Ming. He had been in this world for nearly half a year. His previously suppressed supernatural abilities had gradually been unlocked. He had briefly revealed his true abilities during several missions, quickly becoming a key member of the Warframe squad. The strength he displayed publicly over the past 6 months was only a small fraction of his actual improvement. With his continued practice of Howard's body tempering technique, his various physical attributes had become several times stronger than they were 6 months ago. Dark blue veins appeared on his hands as he removed his hood. These veins were a side effect of his increased strength over the past year, the remnants of accumulated toxins. With his increasing demand for venom from the poison tempering technique, the training poison he used evolved from the original Serpent's Kiss to the now extremely toxic Death Song. This is a corrosive poison made from raw materials from the corrosive race. Even the slightest contact with the corrosive toxins would result in a swift and tragic death from the corrosive toxins, let alone long-term use as an aid to training. However, Liu Ming, who bathed in Death Song almost every few days, had already reached a terrifying level of strength. His physical resistance to poisons was unmatched, given the tens of thousands of transcendents in the Dark Wall. Now, even if he were to drink a bottle of the Serpent's Kiss he used for bathing in during his early training, he would have no reaction. During the past 6 months of missions and adventures with the Warframe squad, as his blood-colored summoned creatures appeared more and more frequently, Liu Ming gradually acquired a legendary title, Blood Beast Swiftblade. Blood Beast refers to the numerous Blood Beast servants under Liu Ming's command, while Swiftblade describes his exceptionally sharp swordsmanship. Blood Beast Swiftblade, a newly promoted hunter title within 6 months, possessed immense strength, unintentionally poised to replace the Warframe squad's second or third most important player. I've reached a bottleneck. Time to break through that barrier, Liu Ming mused, sipping night flame liquor, a specialty of the Night Fortress, to dispel the chill. Over the past 6 months, he had refined Howard's poison technique to a level unprecedented in history. A mere elementary training method had transformed him into a true high-level knight. Even the originator of this training method would be astonished. However, reaching high-level knight was the limit. Aside from the Guardian, Wolf Sword Cuman, he was the only other high-level transcendent he knew of in the entire Night Fortress. But he was the only one who knew the details. He had attempted to enter the Night Crown ruins several times, but each attempt was ultimately thwarted. Now, the urge to explore the ruins began to resurface. Since reaching high knight status over 2 months ago, his training progress had been despairingly slow. He no longer wanted to waste time. He could abort the mission and return home right now, but having come this far, failing to complete it rankled in him. He was determined to explore the enigmatic Night Crown ruins. Have you decided? That's a hopeless situation. A place of death. After leaving the tavern, everyone asked Liu Ming in disbelief. As teammates, Liu Ming made no secret of his impending departure to explore the Night Crown ruins. He remembered seeing fewer faces when he first joined the squad, and a few new ones. This meant that several members had retired or died in the past 6 months, while many new members had joined the Warframe squad. I'm definitely going to visit the Night Crown ruins, Liu Ming said with unwavering determination. His resolute tone froze his teammates, who, despite trying to dissuade him, didn't know where to begin. In the end, they could only sigh in frustration. Returning to his room at the Warframe squad's base, Liu Ming had gathered everything he needed for his upcoming trip. He had a detailed officially available map of the Night Crown ruins, a chain, a large backpack of food and water, a pair of viscous shoes for climbing rocks and walls, and a collection of bottles and jars containing potions. He had meticulously prepared for this trip for 6 months. Exploring the ruins was secondary. The ultimate goal was to find clues to Aaron's parents' disappearance or to recover his remains. Anything short of that was enough to complete the mission. Winters on the St. White Mercer Plateau were freezing cold. Therefore, every room in the Warframe squad's base had a small fireplace, and Liu Ming's was no exception. By the fireplace, besides him, 2 furry figures stood beside him. 6 months ago, the blood beasts summoned from clouded leopards and apes had all perished in battle. These were the blood beasts summoned from the carcasses of 2 frosts or toothed tigers. Though newly summoned, and barely reaching Liu Ming's waist, they were no less powerful than a junior knight. After all, a frost or toothed tiger, a gifted creature like a mature one, could become a mid-level knight-level rot beast. Liu Ming still vividly remembered the trepidation everyone felt when he attempted to magically summon the 2 frosts or toothed tigers. These rare, ancient creatures fetched a high price. Yet, in the end, he had summoned them, leaving not even a bone behind, as 2 tiger-shaped blood beasts. Only these 2 blood beasts remained with him, while those creatures, either too large or too ferocious, remained outside the city. Forbidden entry. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 230, Aerial Ruins, Heavy Fist Shield. While the Warframe team was still asleep, Liu Ming stumbled out in the dim light of dawn. This might be their final farewell. Liu Ming had already made up his mind whether his mission was accomplished or not. He would return. He had already been stranded here for 6 months, and no one could imagine the Earth's profound transformations in that time. That was his true roots. He was merely a passing visitor to this world, even if he had improved and gained immensely. While the Night Wall oversaw the Night Crown ruins, it imposed no restrictions on entry or exit. After all, the authorities still hoped that the many explorers would bring back valuable finds. And yet, in the past 6 months, no fewer than 3 groups of adventurers had entered the ruins and never emerged. Leaving the drawbridge, Liu Ming skirted the city wall and soon arrived at the awe-inspiring ruins. These floating ruins were beyond the reach of ordinary people. They hung hundreds of meters in the air like floating islands. Liu Ming stood motionless before the ruins, as if waiting for something. Countless footsteps clattered. Soon, pairs of blood-red eyes emerged from the still dim winter morning. Hundreds, at least. Liu Ming nodded in satisfaction as he gazed upon these powerful blood beasts. Because the Night Crown ruins are aerial, the blood beasts he'd summoned over the past 6 months have primarily been flying. Of these hundreds, at least 3/4 possessed flight capabilities. Previous explorers had either climbed up using iron chains, or soared aloft in gliders, when the wind picked up. Liu Ming's method of ascending the ruins was different. His fiery red cape suddenly swung to life, and a pair of massive, flaming wings spread behind him. With a whoosh, the wind roared, and he soared into the air. A swarm of dark shadows followed him. Some even combined forces, lifting each other up and soaring high. Liu Ming was the first to leap onto the nearest floating ruin. From a distance, these ruins appear unremarkable, but upon truly stepping inside, their sheer size becomes truly staggering. The patch of ruins Liu Ming stepped upon, for example, was as vast as the Night Fortress. And this floating ruin was just one of the most insignificant within the entire mass of ruins. Hundreds of similar ruins were densely packed together. The ruins were littered with broken walls. Buildings, buried by the dust of time, now came into view. They resembled inverted swords pointing skyward. Sadly, each was only half or a fraction of a shard, as if shattered by some immense force. While the ruins were sparsely populated, the crumbling walls of the damaged structures made the floating ruins appear densely packed. Liu Ming stood on an unknown rock formation, as did his blood beast minions. With a swish, his feet touched the ground, and Liu Ming drew his sword, Jufeng. This place gave him a strange feeling. Although there appeared to be no danger, with no sound or movement, the abject silence made him certain that this was the greatest danger. Even ancient ruins couldn't be this quiet. Under Liu Ming's command, hundreds of ferocious blood beasts quickly and orderly split into two groups. One group, acting as guards, tightly surrounded Liu Ming, while the other, acting as scouts, quickly dispersed and searched the ruins. But the deadly sense of danger lingered. Liu Ming's sixth sense radiated, constantly trying to detect the subtle danger. Swoosh. Like an arrow shot from a bowstring, a dark shadow swiftly pounced towards Liu Ming's face. Its astonishing speed prevented even the surrounding blood beasts from reacting, and it was about to fall upon him. Bang! The sound of a heavy object impacting was heard. Liu Ming calmly retracted his right fist, examining the shadow, struck flat by his blow, with surprise. It was a strange creature, with strong and powerful hind legs but vestigial forelimbs, walking upright, somewhat like a Jurassic dinosaur. A faint yellow halo still lingered on Liu Ming's retracted right fist. The edge of the fist, like cracked rock, appeared indestructible. Anyone who had seen this fist would have recognized it as the Heavy Rock Fist, a technique once practiced by Heavy Rock Watson. Although Liu Ming had been unable to acquire this technique due to financial constraints, when he first encountered it, as he gradually became more affluent, he was able to obtain it through a chance exchange from Bloodhammer, who was selling other items at the market. Within 6 months, he had mastered the technique to a minor degree. While his muscles weren't invulnerable, ordinary blunt force weapons were of no use to him. Before Liu Ming could determine which species the attackers belonged to in this world, over a dozen equally ferocious black figures lunged at him. Even though the blood beasts had reacted and were blocking Liu Ming's way, attacking the attackers, a few still managed to escape and pounce on him. Liu Ming faced the menacing black shadow, yet he neither dodged nor evaded it. Instead, he felt a faint sense of excitement. He clenched his right hand into a fist and suddenly exerted force on his arm, covered in dark blue and blood red lines. Countless flashes of blood flashed, dark red threads flowing from Liu Ming's elbow toward his fist. Instantly, a conical shield the size of a wash basin appeared above Liu Ming's right fist. Liu Ming swiftly swung the blood red shield. Bang, bang, bang. A sound like rain hitting low quartz echoed. The attacking black shadows were completely blocked by the shield. Even as he met his enemies, Liu Ming did not stop counter-attacking, slashing with his left hand, knife in hand. The attackers, with their uncanny speed and form, were struck one after another, retreating with shrill roars. The numerous blood beasts immediately surrounded the attackers, and in the end, only 1 in 10 escaped. With a flick of his right hand, countless blood threads detached from his fist and reappeared on his elbow and arm. Looking at his right hand, Liu Ming nodded with great satisfaction. This was the 5th magical ability his Crimson Hand had awakened in the past 6 months. Advanced Crimson Shield. After numerous attempts to defend against attacks and experiments, Liu Ming felt that with this Crimson Shield, he could withstand forces at least 1 level higher than his own. Although he had never met Wolf Sword Cumin, he was confident that his Crimson Shield could absolutely withstand the indestructible sword energy of the renowned Guardian. After countless extractions of blood energy, absorbing it to strengthen and evolve the Crimson Hand, this legendary magic finally revealed its terrifying side. He pointed his right palm at the corpses of the strange creatures that had attacked him, and a halo of light as sticky as blood shot out from his palm. Flesh and blood writhed in the bloody light, and smaller monsters leaped out from it. The size of Liu Ming's blood beast army had increased significantly. Chapter 231 Winter Moon, Snowstorm coming. During each bitter winter month, a cold front sweeps from the glacial canyon over the rapids and arrives south. This signals the arrival of the harshest survival challenge of the year for the creatures of the Holy White Mercer Plateau. These are the most arduous times of the year for those living in the cloud-top oasis. Temperatures outside often drop to tens of degrees below zero, freezing blood to frost. Even staying indoors without adequate insulation risks freezing to death, let alone those who venture outdoors. Anyone who dares to spend extended periods outdoors during the bitter winter months is no ordinary person. This is a brutal season, one where even monsters hibernate to avoid freezing to death. This lethal climate persists for 3 to 4 months. The ancient ruins of Night Crown, nestled hundreds of meters above the dark forest, are a forbidden zone for life. For anyone but a transcendental being, movement is impossible, constantly threatened by the cold currents. The piercing cold winds from the sky whip through the shattered walls and rubble of sand and stone. Whenever the winds sweep through, the ruins are enveloped in swirling sand and rubble, leaving them dark and gloomy. There was hardly a trace of green in the ruins, as if this place had become a desolate wasteland. Yet, as Liu Ming walked through it, he was convinced that there must be abundant vegetation here. Otherwise, could these strange creatures, which kept coming in waves, survive by consuming sand and stone? However, the fact that these individuals were all flesh and blood suggested there must be an undiscovered source of life, at least water and plants. Elemental life could survive on sand and soil, but it was unheard of for flesh and blood life to survive solely on a diet of sand and stone. Liu Ming's expression faltered as he watched the falling snow. Even though his flame dragon cloak had been unleashed, providing him with a constant supply of warmth, keeping him from feeling the slightest bit of cold in the icy snow, the ice and snow still severely restricted his vision, significantly slowing his progress in exploring the ruins. However, his only consolation was that his blood beasts seemed unaffected by the cold, still frostbitten and frostbitten. Perhaps this was a silver lining in this misfortune. If he relied on himself alone, discovering anything within the staggeringly vast ruins would be a pipe dream. However, the most urgent task at hand wasn't exploring the ruins, but finding the water source he knew existed. The food and water he had brought were extremely limited. If he couldn't find a resupply point, this exploration wouldn't last much longer. Furthermore, his blood beasts weren't machines that could survive on their own, they needed energy too. However, their preferred sustenance was blood. Liu Ming glanced at his watch, then looked up at the growing snowfall, his gaze deep. 3/4 of an hour have already passed. If the wind and snow continue to intensify, we'll need to find temporary shelter after another 1/4 of an hour, otherwise we'll be buried by the blizzard. Quarters are the measurement of time in this world. A 1/4 of an hour is roughly equivalent to an hour and a half on Earth. In other words, Liu Ming and his blood beast herd had already been searching for 4 or 5 hours. This search, obstructed by the wind and snow, seemed all the more protracted, with no significant results. The only slightly valuable discovery was a rusty, dark red object the blood beast had unearthed from beneath a broken wall. It resembled a sword, evident in its rusty, yet still incredibly sharp edge, capable of cutting through hair with a single blow. However, compared to ordinary swords, this object was not only incredibly large, but also peculiar in appearance. If it was a weapon, it was likely the war sword of a giant. Its handle was 2.5 elbows long, and its blade was spiraling, like 2 intertwined blood snakes, forked at the head. The blade was more than a man's height, nearly twice the height of Liu Ming. Despite its immense length, the blade was not wide. Based on Liu Ming's assessment of the size of the sword's wielder, it was likely a narrow-bladed sword. Dark red rust, like iron, covered the entire blade. Liu Ming handed the narrow-bladed greatsword to a massive ape-like blood beast. The blood beast, roughly as tall as the sword itself, followed Liu Ming closely, using its tail and hands to support the greatsword. A 1/4 of an hour later, the wind and snow intensified, threatening to turn into a blizzard. Liu Ming realized he was losing ground and that further exploration was futile. He quickly recalled the scattered blood beasts. Hundreds of them quickly gathered around him. He took a quick count, confirming that none were missing, save for those killed in previous attacks. Reassured, he began searching for a sturdy shelter. The entire floating ruins consisted of shattered buildings, so finding shelter from the wind and snow shouldn't be difficult. However, these shattered buildings, with even the roofs blown off, offered no protection at all. He feared that seeking shelter would mean either being buried by the blizzard or having to search for another safe spot. Naturally, they needed to seek shelter from the blizzard. Liu Ming naturally wanted to make a decisive move, finding a safe place where he could hide until the storm passed. Half a quarter of an hour later, the blizzard was already gaining momentum, with the wind and snow so fierce it could blow away stones as big as millstones. Liu Ming ordered the blood beasts to stay close together to withstand the blizzard. Although all the blood beasts obeyed the order and stayed close together, several of the blood beasts on the outermost edge were inevitably blown away by the blizzard. Whoosh! The wind raged, snow and dust lashing at them. Liu Ming instinctively wanted to protect his men, but just as he was about to make a move, he stopped himself. Although he was adept at navigating the blizzard, he had no energy left to protect his blood beasts from being blown away. He could only desperately search for a safe place to stay in the blizzard. As the blizzard intensified and blood beasts were constantly being blown away, an emerald green figure, floating in midair, suddenly sprinted towards Liu Ming. Liu Ming was overjoyed upon seeing this figure and quickly asked, "Kemenwen, have you found anything?" After 4 or 5 months of silence in this world, Kemenwen had finally adapted to its rules, breaking the seal and emerging. Because Kemenwen was a semi-energy being, this environment was extremely harsh for physical life, but for an energy being like a heroic spirit, even the strongest wind and snow were merely a harmless backdrop. Therefore, Liu Ming summoned him long before the blizzard arrived and sent him to find a suitable shelter. "My lord, there's a large building complex over there that's relatively undamaged," Kemenwen replied as he flew towards Liu Ming. "Very good, you lead the way and follow me." Liu Ming's eyes flashed with joy, and he quickly signaled Kemenwen not to return, but to lead the way directly. As the blizzard roared across the ruins, Liu Ming, led by Kemenwen and hundreds of blood beasts, finally managed to take shelter within a cluster of buildings. The towering walls and dome blocked out the overwhelming force of the wind and snow. Even the icy wind that drifted through the gaps and ice was of little concern. The midday sun, which should have been shining brightly, was now as dim as a solar eclipse. The roar of the hurricane echoed throughout the ruins, blanketing the sky with snow and ice, while the clanging of flying sand and rocks echoed from beyond the solid walls and dome. Chapter 232, Flame Illusion, Yellow Sandworm Swarm, Part 1. Wrapped entirely in a flame dragon cloak, Liu Ming leaned against the back of a furry bloodbeast, his expression alert yet tinged with comfort. The flame dragon cloak was indeed a valuable treasure, especially its inherent fire properties, which were extremely useful in this freezing winter with temperatures dropping dozens of degrees Celsius below zero. During the days of the Dark Fortress, compared to the hunters bundled up like furry men, Liu Ming, clad only in a long cloak, while on a mission in the freezing wind, was quite a sight to behold. Even transcendents could only ignore the ordinary cold. In such freezing temperatures, maintaining a constant body temperature outdoors was difficult. However, they had no idea that Liu Ming's flame dragon cloak also had a built-in furnace effect. Even in the bitterest of winds, Liu Ming maintained a calm demeanor. He simply didn't feel the cold. What puzzled Liu Ming was that not only was he not cold, but the bloodbeasts seemed impervious to the cold either. Even though their bodies were as cold as iron, they felt no chill, not even a shiver. Could it be that his summons weren't afraid of the cold? No, more likely, they lack sensory nerves. How else could they explain their fearless fighting, completely unconcerned with their injuries, and their apparent unfazed resistance to the harsh conditions? He didn't believe the bloodbeasts possessed resistance to all attributes. However, lacking sensory nerves didn't mean they weren't immune to the cold. The low temperatures would still cause frostbite in their muscles and stiffen their joints, significantly impacting their combat effectiveness at critical moments. He had to ensure his men maintained both their strength and their internal heat. Liu Ming counted his men and found 3 more missing from their search for shelter. Those 3 unfortunate creatures had likely been swept away by the blizzard. In this weather, even the gods couldn't save them. Liu Ming could only mourn for them for 3 seconds. Then, he selected the blood beasts with fire attributes. Each of these fire beasts brought along a few companions with other attributes that weren't as cold resistant, and they all set out to search for flammable materials. The reason for ensuring that each blood beast team searching for combustibles included a fire attributed blood beast was to provide warmth in case any unfortunate individuals froze. He couldn't imagine that after the snowstorm, hundreds of his blood beasts would be frozen to the point of only a tenth of their combat power. Liu Ming himself began searching the ruins, refusing to believe that such a vast site would be filled with nothing but stone. A quarter of an hour later, Liu Ming returned to his starting point, his face filled with frustration, having found nothing. After a complete circuit, all he saw was stone, as if the entire ruins were made entirely of stone. Fortunately, after a while, as his blood beasts gradually returned, they finally made some additional discoveries. They gathered a few scattered wooden materials. While the find wasn't much, it was enough to start a fire. At Liu Ming's signal, a fiery red vulture emerged from the herd. This blood beast, summoned from the fiery vulture, possessed a powerful fire-controlling attribute. The fiery vulture, the frequent culprit for wildfires in the dark night forest, possessed a ferocious and bloodthirsty nature. A blood-red vulture emerged, letting out a high-pitched cry, its long slender neck instantly turning even crimson. Bang! A ball of red flame erupted from its long neck, landing on the pile of wood. The blaze instantly ignited. Liu Ming, with hundreds of blood beasts, some ferocious and some fierce, gathered around the bonfire for warmth. The fire-attributed blood beasts, like himself, didn't need the warmth of the flames, and naturally sat at the outermost edge. Liu Ming placed the colder blood beasts closer to the center. Outside, the blizzard raged on, the howling winds relentless. The bonfire within this relatively intact ancient building seemed to be the only source of warmth in the icy landscape. Whenever the flames waned, Liu Ming would send the blood beasts to fetch more fuel. Amidst the raging blizzard, beside the warmth of the fire, the dangers of the ruins seemed momentarily forgotten. Liu Ming cast aside the caution he had initially felt upon entering the ruins. Gazing at the flickering firelight, he gradually grew drowsy. It was dark, time for bed. A subconscious reminder kept urging Liu Ming to sleep quickly. No. A sudden surge of crisis washed over Liu Ming. He forced open his eyelids, which felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds, and with a single thrust, he stood up, slamming his sword into the ground, and commanding his army of blood beasts to immediately engage in battle. The crouching blood beasts, upon hearing the command, all rose to their feet. They sensed the wrath of their master, and their restful demeanor shone with clenched teeth, growling and snarling at the surroundings. Like a pack of beasts fresh from hell, a rustling sound filled the air. Liu Ming could feel the ground trembling beneath his feet, as if something dangerous was approaching from beneath the earth. What's this? A bug? Liu Ming watched as a dark yellow cylindrical worm-like creature burrowed through the ground, its ferocious chrysanthemum-like mouth flaring as it lunged at a blood beast. Despite its ferocious appearance, the wolf-like blood beast instantly crushed it into a pulp with its massive claws. He was puzzled. So weak. But in the next breath, his puzzlement turned to horror. A large hole suddenly appeared in the ground beneath the slain yellow bug, and hundreds of bugs quickly crawled out. Each one grew larger than the last, the largest as thick as a thigh and as large as a python. Their murky yellow eyes glared coldly at Liu Ming and his blood beasts. Yellow sandworms? Liu Ming didn't recognize the origins of the upright monsters that had attacked him, but these bugs were mentioned in numerous places in the archaeological records he had collected over the past 6 months. Yellow sandworms, found in the ruins of the Night Crown ancient ruins. These insects feed on sand and stone, and secrete a hallucinogenic mucus from their mouthparts. Individual yellow sandworms lack independent consciousness, but when they swarm, they form a master consciousness. This collective consciousness possesses powerful hallucinogenic abilities, allowing creatures to unconsciously slumber in a dreamlike state. I just suddenly felt drowsy and let my guard down. It seems this swarm consciousness is at work, Liu Ming thought to himself. He bit the tip of his tongue, using the pain to stay awake and alert to avoid being smitten again. Yellow sandworms are a common danger in the Night Crown ruins. Despite their common presence, these monsters have one of the highest mortality rates among explorers. While individual yellow sandworms are not particularly powerful, their numbers and strangeness are incredibly alarming. They feed on sand and stone, and their bodies are not primarily flesh and blood, but rather elemental. Therefore, only a pounding like the blood wolf just now, like the one that just pulverized them, can truly kill them. Otherwise, it's difficult to inflict effective damage. Considering the sheer volume of sand and rock in the ruins, the sheer number of yellow sandworms that could hatch is simply unimaginable. The yellow sandworms possess two densely packed rows of legs, each as sharp as an aloe sickle. These legs not only serve as their locomotion and burrowing mechanism, but also as their most practical weapon. Their heads are connected to their bodies, terminating in a dark, fang-like mouth. When it opens and closes, it reveals a ferocious, fang-filled maw, like a cracked chrysanthemum. These black, shredded teeth are capable of shattering solid stone. Lift off. Seeing the oncoming swarm of insects, Liu Ming had no choice but to lead his men off the ground. Most of his blood beasts were flying, so fighting them on the ground was sheer folly. As Liu Ming and his blood beasts ascended and neared the dome, the swarm of insects blanketed the ground, forming a dense, three-layered formation. The larger flying blood beasts lifted their flightless companions and took to the air with them. But a few were a little slow, caught by the yellow sandworms, instantly transforming from a pile of flesh and blood into a pile of white bones, and finally devouring even the bones. If they had landed at this point, they would have been unable to find a foothold. The dome of the ruins was very high. When Liu Ming and hundreds of blood beasts rose dozens of meters into the air, the crawling yellow sandworms were temporarily out of reach. Even if they jumped, they could not reach Liu Ming, who was dozens of meters above. The two sides remained in a stalemate. Chapter 233, Flame Illusion, Yellow Sandworm Swarm, Part 2. The entire complex beneath the dome was enormous, so vast that even with hundreds of blood beasts levitating, it didn't seem crowded. However, every inch of the ground was covered in yellow sandworms, each one atop another, a blanket of fat cylindrical worms. Even the mere sight of them would make even the most ordinary person nauseous. Liu Ming, however, remained unfazed. The appearance of these worms was inversely proportional to their strength. Though seemingly vulnerable, the shells formed by these sandworms, consuming sand and rock, offered incredible defensive power. Outside, a fierce blizzard threatened to extinguish their fate. Inside, the swarms of insects filled the air. A blood beast's strength would eventually run out, and upon landing, it would undoubtedly be devoured by the swarms. Liu Ming frowned, facing the threat of wolves in front and tigers behind. Yellow sandworms. Yellow sandworms. He muttered, silently recalling the information he had read about them. When he saw the bonfire he and the blood beasts had gathered around, before launching into the air, it was still burning, and a sudden realization struck him. That's right. Fire. Though the bonfire had dwindled due to the lack of flammable materials, the flame still burned brightly. Meanwhile, the yellow sandworms surrounding the fire preferred to pile on their companions, rather than approach the flames. Yellow sandworms fear fire, and flames can disperse a swarm, and even kill them. This was a description of yellow sandworms Liu Ming had found in a miscellaneous notebook titled Memories of Old Night Crown Impressions. According to the author, each person described in his book had personally experienced adventures in Night Crown City, including this man who encountered and escaped yellow sandworms while exploring the Night Crown ruins. Although he was the only one to escape the swarm, while all his companions perished, he not only survived, but also shared the secret of his escape. The yellow sandworms fear fire. It's said he escaped because, on the night the insect swarm attacked, he'd fought his way through the encirclement, clutching a torch. Fire? I've got plenty. With a wave of his hand, several pitch black tokens materialized in front of Liu Ming. Go. Boom boom boom. Powerful explosions echoed from the ground, where the insects were clustered, sending vast swarms flying. Violent yellow juice and fluid splattered high into the air. The large sandworms, only slightly injured in the blast, were engulfed in the black transparent flames, emitting a sizzling sound. They writhed in agony in the sand and even tried to burrow into the earth to extinguish the flames. However, it was all in vain. The flames continued to burn fiercely, using their bodies as fuel. Soon, the sand was reduced to a heap of charred ash. Seeing the flames' effectiveness, Liu Ming was overjoyed. Full fire. Burn them. He roared, commanding all his fire-attributed blood beasts to unleash a fiery attack on the sandworms on the ground. A riot of flames, fiery breaths, fireballs, and other attacks all swept from the air towards the yellow sandworm swarm on the ground. Moments later, the vast swarm directly below Liu Ming was swept away, leaving behind a scorched stench and pools of charred ash. Squeak, squeak. As if realizing their situation was hopeless, the mysterious yellow sandworm swarm gathered its will and began to organize an orderly retreat. Holes were rapidly dug by the yellow sandworms, and one by one, they slipped into the holes and began to leave. Liu Ming was exhausted. Not only was his internal energy nearly depleted, but even the flame energy stored in his flame dragon cloak was flickering, nearing depletion. He had to manually recharge the cloak with energy to restore its power. Another round of fighting would exhaust the cloak's energy, and his own energy would be completely gone, and his ability to fly would be lost. Upon landing, Liu Ming saw these abominable insects, who had no reason to waste their lives, sapping his strength, and gnashed with hatred. However, since the insects had retreated, he stopped causing trouble and silently watched the yellow sandworm army depart. Only after the last small group of yellow sandworms had entered the cave and departed did he descend to the ground, leading the blood beast army from mid-air. He then directed the blood beasts to rest by the still smoldering bonfire, warming themselves and recovering their strength. He himself then approached the ashes left behind by the yellow sandworms. Even though these insects had been burned to ash, surely they had left behind something valuable? With this thought in mind, Liu Ming used his sharp blade to rummage through the piles of ashes. And sure enough, he actually found something. From the vast pile of ashes, he uncovered a dark yellow bead. Round, but with a bumpy surface, it resembled the stones commonly found on riverbanks. Liu Ming picked it up, not mistaking it for a stone. It was definitely a valuable find. He could clearly sense the surge of pure energy within it. This must be a crystal left behind by a highly evolved yellow sandworm. Let's call it a yellow sandworm crystal, Liu Ming thought to himself. He stuffed the yellow sandworm crystal into his arms and began searching for other relics from the yellow sandworm swarm. With this first find, and reassured that his work wasn't in vain, Liu Ming searched with renewed vigor and enthusiasm. He thoroughly rummaged through the surrounding ashes, uncovering 40 or 50 of those murky yellow beads. He spread out the beads, which he had named yellow sandworm crystals, one by one before him. He picked up one and fiddled with it near the fire. The light from the flames shone a rainbow-like reflection, looking quite impressive. Under Liu Ming's control, Yuan Qi rapidly penetrated the yellow sandworm crystal, sending a surge of energy flowing from his hand, gripping the crystal, toward his brain. What is this? Liu Ming, feeling the sudden surge of energy, suddenly opened his eyes wide, stunned by the object in his hand. Ectoplasm energy. I didn't expect this humble insect crystal to contain it. After absorbing the energy from a single insect crystal, Liu Ming licked his chapped lips with a sense of satisfaction. The energy he had just absorbed alone had boosted his mental strength by at least 1/10. Ectoplasm energy, second only to the miraculous substance that can directly enhance the strength of spiritual energy entities like heroic spirits, is extremely difficult to find. Resisting the urge to continue absorbing the ectoplasm from the insect crystals, Liu Ming summoned Kamenwen from the heroic spirit dimension and immediately gave all the insect crystals to this heroic spirit, the only one with whom he could communicate normally. For the past 6 months in this world, thanks to the handsome old heroic spirit who had broken the seal and appeared a month or 2 ago, Liu Ming wouldn't have had anyone to talk to. As for the blood beasts, they were all ferocious beasts of low intelligence, far inferior to Sumi and the cunning Rang Sanxiao, making communication impossible. The only person Liu Ming could communicate with was the handsome old heroic spirit, who spoke in a rather childish manner. The handsome old man received Liu Ming's order without hesitation and absorbed them one by one. Liu Ming was driving him expectantly. Mengwen was only at the first level C level. He felt that after the heroic spirit evolved to level B, he would probably bring him a big surprise. Chapter 234 Deadly Demonic Plants, Searching for Insect Nests. It took Mengwen 2 full hours to absorb dozens of yellow sandworm crystals, each imbued with immense psychic energy. This made Liu Ming sigh in wonder. No wonder the yellow sandworm swarm possessed such potent hallucinogenic abilities, even affecting him. The sheer amount of psychic energy alone was enough to demonstrate this. As the last crystal gradually became transparent after Mengwen's absorption, it floated in front of him and fell to the ground with a thud. The handsome old man finally opened his long closed eyes. A powerful air current swept outward from Mengwen, sweeping up countless sand, dust, and rocks with a crackling sound. Even the nearby campfire flickered in the powerful current, seemingly threatening to be extinguished at any moment. The blood beasts warming themselves by the fire had their fur ripped apart by the current, and a chill washed over them. They looked helplessly at Liu Ming and the culprit. Fortunately, the current had arrived without warning and dissipated just as quickly. Just as Liu Ming was about to stabilize the fire, the air current dissipated. Countless azure stars descended from the sky, as if a green sky were floating overhead, sprinkling countless stars. Mengwen slowly raised his withered staff, pointing the tip at the azure sky. Countless stars flew towards Mengwen's staff and body like moths to a flame. Within a few dozen breaths, the countless stars were absorbed into Mengwen's body. His aura also continued to rise, rapidly ascending from the peak of C level to the peak of B level. Mengwen's attributes also changed dramatically. Name: Nature Hero Mengwen. Level: Level 1B, Peak. Abilities: Awakening the Treeman, Growing All Things, Deadly Magic Plant, Nature's Crown. Talents: Entangling Binding, Tranquil Light, Insane Growth. Specialties: Whisper of Nature, Vine Shield, Bloodthirsty Plant. In addition to increasing his power level by a full stage, the original Deadly Thorn evolved into a Deadly Magic Plant. He also gained a new talent for rampant growth and a special ability for bloodthirsty plants. With few plants visible throughout the ruins, rampant growth was unusable. Since bloodthirsty plants also required plant life, Liu Ming had Mengwen demonstrate the Deadly Thorn's upgraded version, Deadly Magic Plants. Previously, Deadly Thorn simply served as an entanglement spell. In battles where Liu Ming's opponent was evenly matched, it only exerted a minor negative binding effect, though even that effect was minimal. Liu Ming looked eagerly at the upgrade to such a useless ability, wondering if the resulting effect would amaze him. As you command, my guardian. Mengwen bowed slightly and waved his staff, pointing the tip at the ground dozens of meters away. A sudden, thunderous roar startled Liu Ming. With a crash, the ground Meng had just pointed at suddenly buckled upwards. The earth instantly cracked, and countless rocks shattered. A staggeringly massive vine, thicker than a single family building, erupted from the ground. In a matter of seconds, it broke through the dome and stretched beyond the ruins. Liu Ming was speechless as he gazed upon the behemoth before him, sensing its terrifying power, at least at the pinnacle of C class, perhaps even reaching B class. But that wasn't enough. With a wave of his hand, Mengwen sent a shimmering, lush green light flying towards the vine. Natural crown. The vine trembled wildly as the green light merged with it, transforming from its previously slightly rigid state into the agility of a giant python. The portion extending beyond the dome quickly retracted. A thin layer of frost even formed on the vine, a testament to the freezing temperatures outside. Just a few breaths of frost formed on the vine. After observing the vine, even striking it with powerful punches, and slashing it with his sharp blade, Liu Ming, observing the palm-sized wound and the few drops of dark green liquid that oozed out, was certain that this creature possessed the overall strength of a B class, not to mention the astonishing defense of a pinnacle B class. This vine, now incredibly agile, and possessing a certain level of combat instincts thanks to the natural crown, could probably hold its own against some A-rank monsters of average combat power. How long can it last? Liu Ming asked Mengwen, pointing at the giant vine. The once useless binding ability had now become a primary combat asset in Liu Ming's eyes. This creature's defense was undoubtedly several times stronger than Jizirang's after his enlargement. Of course, that was only compared to Jizirang a year ago. It's unclear how much time has passed on Earth in the past 6 months, and whether Jizirang's strength has significantly improved. My guardian, 10 minutes. With the natural crown's blessing, the deadly demonic plant can last 10 minutes. Without it, it would only last 3 minutes, before collapsing due to energy depletion, Kamenwen replied. Observing the giant vine, Liu Ming continued, is it the only one I can summon? Can other demonic plants be summoned? While the giant vine possessed impressive defense, its attack effectiveness and destructive power weren't necessarily as strong, and might not be as satisfactory. If I could summon some special plants according to my own ideas, it would probably be even more satisfying. Of course, this is just a simple magical plant I summoned, based on its characteristics, Kamenwen agreed. Liu Ming's heart was filled with joy. I hope you can summon this magical plant. It's flat, with sharp serrations on both sides. It's called the sawtooth man-eating plant. I wonder if you have any of these plants in your memory? Liu Ming told Kamenwen about a notorious man-eating plant from later times, and gestured for him to try to summon it. Boom. Just like the deafening sound just now, a huge, vibrant crimson plant burst forth from the ground. It was flat, with meridians distributed throughout its body like blood vessels. Its flat trunk was flanked by extremely sharp serrations, which spun rapidly as it swayed and twitched, cutting like a chainsaw. Liu Ming smiled with satisfaction, nodding as he gazed at the two enormous plants, tamed like pets. The green light surrounding Kamenwen had also diminished by a significant amount, suggesting he had expended considerable effort summoning these two behemoths. Let's go. Let's find those damned bugs in this ruins. Hopefully, their bug crystals will allow you to break through to rank B. Liu Ming, relishing the opportunity, now focused on hunting enough yellow sandworms before the storm abated to allow Kamenwen to evolve once more. Reaching rank A would presumably significantly enhance the summoning power of this deadly demonic plant. Even if the increase wasn't significant, the summoning time and number of plants would likely increase. This ruins exploration might depend on Kamenwen, the constant support. The blood beast suddenly rose from the fire and, under Liu Ming's command, began searching for the bug nest. Since they had suddenly attacked him in the ruins, their lair should also be there. Chapter 235, Digging Blood Beast, Phantom Songstress. The giant snake vine and the sawtooth man-eating grass lasted only 10 minutes. Shortly after exploring, with a deafening roar, the two deadly demonic plants summoned by Kamenwen disintegrated into streams of energy and vanished. Meanwhile, the blood beast continued to search the ruins for the yellow sandworm's lair. After a quarter of an hour of searching, there was still little progress. A quarter of the ruins, encased within the dome, had been scoured. Still, no trace of the yellow sandworms was found. Liu Ming couldn't help but miss Jizirang, the skilled digger. In desperation, Liu Ming could only control a blood beast with pangolin-like attributes to dig through the holes left by the yellow sandworms, hoping to find a path to their lair. The blood beast, with two pairs of large dark red claws, was the size of an average large hound, its body covered in seamless black scales. As it began to dig rapidly at Liu Ming's command, its claws swung like 4 shovels. Chunks of dirt were constantly being dug out of the cave in trance. Soon, the hole gradually widened, revealing the exact direction the yellow sandworms had retreated. That direction pointed directly to an area still unexplored. Super Pangolin, keep digging. The rest of you search in that direction. Liu Ming waved his hand, commanding hundreds of blood beasts to surge towards that area. Only the pangolins, still digging furiously, and himself, acting as overseers, remained. Each blood beast had a subtle spiritual connection with him, so he wasn't worried about not being able to locate the pangolins once they burrowed deeper into the earth. However, Liu Ming ultimately didn't wait for the blood beasts to find the yellow sandworm's lair before being distracted by another discovery. In Liu Ming's mind, the connection with the blood beasts was rapidly fading. This meant that they were all in danger and a threat. He was well aware of the strength of his blood beasts, and had always maintained a healthy number of them during his hunts in the dark forest. He maintained the total number of blood beasts at around 100, and paid close attention to their quality. Even the weakest of these hundreds was no less powerful than a full knight, equivalent to a D-level evolved class on Earth. He was able to quickly terminate his connection with multiple blood beasts. The monsters that appeared this time were either extremely powerful or numerous. Super Pangolin, keep digging. I'll be back soon. Liu Ming instructed the pangolin blood beast still digging in the darkness underground, then rushed towards the spot where the blood beast had disappeared. During this time, he also recharged his flame dragon wing cloak. The flame dragon wings instantly spread, and Liu Ming shot towards the area at a speed of tens of meters per second. The numerous blood beasts that had scattered in search of the yellow sandworms, summoned by their master, Liu Ming, quickly converged in his direction. Like an army, upon receiving military intelligence, these blood beasts swiftly gathered to protect their leader. 3 of them were the largest. Each of these 3 blood beasts was individually named by Liu Ming and meticulously nurtured to excel in their high-level qualities. They were a blood beast evolved from a chrysanthemum patent poison frog named Black Chrysanthemum, a flying blood beast summoned from a Kangshan giant eagle named Sky, and a blood beast summoned from a giant ape named Bronze Wall. Each of these blood beasts possessed strength comparable to that of a peak junior knight. Their combined power could even rival that of the armored squad leader, Senior Knight Aus. This was truly remarkable strength. After all, even after 6 months of training, Liu Ming's strength had dramatically improved, yet he still had no confidence of defeating Aus, a mid-level knight nearing the pinnacle of a high-level knight. Just as Liu Ming joined the first group of blood beasts, a sudden flash of blood appeared. A icy cold front struck Liu Ming. Bronze Wall. Liu Ming roared. Bang! The gigantic ape-like blood beast, summoned from the flesh and blood of the Iron Wall giant ape, instantly appeared before him like a wall of steel. The shadowy figure was blocked by the Bronze Wall's arms, and violently sent flying by the recoil, struggling to recover. Only then did Liu Ming clearly see the creature that had attacked him. It was a tiny creature, barely the size of 2 palms, with wings as thin as a cicada's and 2 curved antennae dangling from its head. Its large watery eyes glared at Liu Ming with a look of deep resentment. It seemed unfazed by the sudden attack, feeling instead that it, having been knocked back, was the victim. However, Liu Ming didn't let the creature's harmless appearance lull him into a state of complacency. This was the ancient ruins of Night Crown, a desolate place where the mortality rate for explorers was as high as 95%. Any creature capable of surviving alone in such an environment was bound to have a mortal side. He believed the creature before him wasn't as foolish as it appeared. Furthermore, judging by its blood-drenched claws, it was likely responsible for the deaths of his lost blood beasts. Liu Ming's face was etched with pain. He felt vaguely familiar, as if he had seen this creature before. Sure enough, as if noticing Liu Ming's unwavering vigilance, the creature attacked him again. Along with its attacks, a melodious song began to play from nowhere. As the song began to play, Liu Ming felt a sense of daze, as if he had been up all night for 7 days and nights, unable to muster the energy even in the face of danger. He bit his tongue hard, and a sweet, hot stream of water rushed into his mouth, the pain dispelling the sleepiness. He finally remembered why this creature looked familiar. He had seen it not long ago in a book documenting the ruins of the Night Crown ancient ruins. It also included a description and a sketch of a creature called the Phantom Songstress. This creature was known for its strong hallucinogenic properties, and it seemed that monsters throughout the ruins shared this ability. The yellow sandworm swarm he had encountered before was one of them, and so was the Phantom Songstress this time. Could the hallucinogenic properties of these creatures be related to the environment of the ruins? Liu Ming couldn't help but think of a connection, trying to deduce. Meanwhile, the Phantom Songstress was rapidly being overwhelmed by the ever-approaching blood beasts. The Songstress's abilities were ineffective against Liu Ming, and even less effective against the blood beasts, which had little remaining intelligence. Without a hallucinogenic song, the Songstress could only rely on lightning-fast attacks against Liu Ming. Even if she could circumvent a blood beast, she would struggle to break through their encirclement and reach Liu Ming, who was protected at the innermost circle. Gradually, the songstress's song faded, and her speed, once capable of creating a series of illusions, slowed. Snap. Finally, in another attack, the tiny songstress, after a failed attempt to strike Liu Ming, was struck by the long-awaited palm, the size of a copper wall and palm leaf fan, a blow that shattered mountains and rocks. Like a bird with its wings broken, its delicate body flew backwards dozens of meters before gradually fading. Chapter 236, Diva's Treasure, Fusion, and Mutation. After being knocked away, the Phantom Diva fell unconscious for a moment. When she regained consciousness, she was horrified to find herself held in the arms of a massive creature. Fear, curiosity, shock, and other expressions crossed the Phantom Diva's delicate face. Liu Ming observed the ever-changing expression of the creature before him with great interest, intrigued by its diverse range of expressions. This clearly demonstrated a complex intelligence, suggesting it must belong to an extremely rare and highly intelligent species. Intelligence implies the ability to communicate, and communication, especially with the intelligent creatures that presumably inhabited the ruins, would make exploring the ruins like having a local guide. At this thought, Liu Ming's gaze on the creature, whom he had so easily crushed, changed. It was the expression of a collector upon seeing a rare treasure. Eagerness and anticipation flashed across his face. In all the records he could find about the Night Crown ruins, the Phantom Songbird was probably the only fully intelligent creature. The chances of encountering one again were incredibly small. So, Liu Ming immediately abandoned his quest to find the yellow sandworm's lair, ordered the blood beasts to remain on guard, and began attempting to communicate with the Phantom Songbird. A quarter of an hour later, through Liu Ming's unwavering use of coercion, inducement, and other methods, as well as his ability to communicate with her through telepathy, the Phantom Songbird was finally temporarily tamed. At least now, she no longer resisted answering anything Liu Ming asked her. Do you know where the yellow sandworm swarm is? QQ, check it out. They're those bloated, cylindrical dull yellow creatures with many thin, segmented legs. QQQ. Their lair is in the northwest corner of the ruins? Great, take me there. After some communication, Liu Ming finally learned the hideout of the abominable insects from the local tyrant, the Phantom Songbird. However, the singer seemed reluctant to lead Liu Ming to the yellow sandworm's lair. She exuded a deep sense of fear and slowly flew southeast, motioning for Liu Ming to follow. After more than a quarter of an hour, Liu Ming finally reached their destination, following the Phantom songstress, QQ. QQ was the name Liu Ming had given her because of her QQ cry. Curious, Liu Ming walked along, hundreds of blood beasts following closely behind him. With the blood beasts by his side, Liu Ming's safety was assured. He wasn't worried about the Phantom songstress, now barely tamed, plotting against him. Instead, he was curious about where she planned to take him. It was a one-story building in the southeastern area of the ruins that looked like it was about to collapse, definitely meeting the standards of a dangerous building. While Liu Ming was still observing, as if trying to determine when the building would completely collapse, the Phantom songstress had already rushed in. Liu Ming shook his head with a helpless smile and quickly followed her inside. Upon entering the building, Liu Ming couldn't help but sigh. The inside and the outside are incompatible. While the exterior looked like a dilapidated building poised for collapse, the interior was a magnificent spectacle. The building consisted of only one story, yet each floor stood at least 10 meters tall. The architectural style was dominated by golden and bright yellow. Upon entering, the Phantom Diva QQ flew towards a small pile of items. She lay halfway atop the pile, her expression remarkably content. Liu Ming also surveyed the pile. He didn't recognize most of the materials and items, but as he approached the pile, the Jufeng sword strapped to his back began to vibrate rapidly. This sudden anomaly both puzzled and delighted Liu Ming. The scholared hand had exhibited this anomaly several times before its evolution. It seemed that among the items belonging to the Phantom Diva, there must be something that could attract Jufeng's attention. Liu Ming suppressed his impatience and began to discuss matters with the Diva, whom he had only temporarily subjugated and to whom he held no real loyalty. His request to obtain an item from the singer's treasure trove was quickly granted by the gracious singer. Liu Ming also drew his Jufeng blade and began to search the pile of items. Glittering stones, unusually colored crystals, pink metal flakes, and other bizarre yet insignificant items appeared before him. Liu Ming, holding the Jufeng like a minesweeper sweeping a minefield, examined each item one by one. Finally, he had searched roughly 3/4 of the vast pile. The appearance of a golden crystal triggered a powerful reaction in the Jufeng blade. The hilt began to burn, and a wave of consciousness emanated from the Jufeng blade, seeking to devour the crystal. Liu Ming knew he had found the true culprit. Devour. Slowly releasing the hilt, the Jufeng blade generated a force of attraction, and the golden crystal and the blade tip collided. The sharp tip instantly pierced the crystal's outer shell and penetrated the inner layer. The punctured golden crystal instantly erupted with dazzling brilliance, and streams of golden liquid, shimmering in various colors, rapidly spread from the blade's tip toward the blade's body. As the golden liquid spread, Jufeng's silver-white blade took on a golden hue. Golden veins coexisted with silver. The Jufeng blade continued to tremble violently, its trembling increasing in frequency as more and more liquid seeped out of the golden crystal. The golden veins on the silver blade also slowly spread, much like a drop of ink on a rice paper merchant spreading outward. At a speed barely perceptible to the naked eye, the golden veins slowly covered the silver blade. Eventually, they seemed to envelop the entire Jufeng blade, but the pace was incredibly slow. When the golden crystal had drained the last drop of golden liquid, only the crystal shell remained. Liu Ming stored the shell, fearing it would be needed later, and began to grip the Jufeng blade tightly, slashing through the air. He wondered what would happen to Jufeng after absorbing this mysterious golden crystal. At this point, Jufeng's attributes hadn't yet revealed any significant changes. But through the swing, Liu Ming could clearly sense that the sharpness of the sword as it sliced through the air had increased slightly compared to before. It was roughly 1/8 or 1/9 sharper. Though not a significant difference, Liu Ming was already delighted. After all, only a tiny fraction of the golden lines had been truly absorbed, assimilated, or fused with the sword. Even so, it was a slight increase in sharpness. He was eager to see how much more powerful the sword would be once all the golden lines had been absorbed by the sword. He was likely to double, or even multiply, its power without a problem. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 237, Yellow Sandworm Nest, The Wrath of Nature, Part 1. A day after the phantom songstress's attack, the howling blizzard finally showed signs of abating. During that day, trapped by the blizzard, even after the pangolin, known for its remarkable digging prowess, dug its burrow outside the ruins, it still found no trace of the yellow sandworms. It seemed their lair wasn't within the ruins, as Liu Ming had suspected. After several unsuccessful searches for the yellow sandworms, Liu Ming was on the verge of giving up. The whirring wind gradually died down, and a furry blood beast, resembling a winter bear emerging from its den, slowly crawled out of the ruins. Once it confirmed the blizzard had completely subsided, Liu Ming led the remaining blood beasts out of the dome. The ice and snow outside had already largely obscured a gap in the ruins' outer wall, more than a meter high. As several larger blood beasts swarmed through the gap, the accumulated snow was instantly cleared. When Liu Ming emerged from the dome, he discovered clusters of massive icicles clinging to the ruins' shattered exterior walls. These spikes, like short spears and swords, crisscross the walls, giving the entire complex the appearance of a frost hedgehog covered in icy spikes. Liu Ming had no desire to witness the ruins' bizarre transformation amidst the icy snow. He was preoccupied with another matter. His food supply was dwindling, and his water supply would soon be exhausted. He needed to find food and water quickly. Of course, the snow drifts left by the sudden blizzard would temporarily alleviate his water shortage. However, the ice and snow would eventually melt, and relying on snow water for hydration wasn't a long-term solution. Not only him, but the hundreds of blood beasts under his command also needed water and food. Even if they could obtain food and moisture through flesh and blood, the blizzard made sustenance even more difficult. The already scarce creatures in the ruins were either perishing or forced to hide in the blizzard. In these harsh conditions, even encountering a single living creature, let alone hunting one, was a matter of course. Liu Ming had already been out of the ruins for a long time, growing impatient, when a small figure finally emerged. "I thought I was missing something. Why are you so slow?" Liu Ming said, a little speechless, as he looked at the phantom diver clutching an oversized backpack that was 5 or 6 times larger than his own body. The Phantom Diver's tiny figure was almost completely obscured by the enormous backpack, with only her tiny head visible. Okay, I'll bring you back later. Don't look so resentful. Seeing the little creature's face full of dissatisfaction, as if blaming him for forcing it to leave, causing her to not only leave home but also lose a lot of treasures, Liu Ming could only offer temporary comfort. As for whether to stay or leave after completing the mission, it was up to him to decide. He was leaning towards leaving immediately. After all, he had already spent too much time in this world. Before leaving, however, he still had to visit Jerry Town and the Half Mountain Manor. After all, after completing the quest, he still had to find the person who had requested it, complete it, and claim the final reward. He was deeply curious about the training method of the great knight in Aaron's possession. His experiences over the past 6 months had taught him that the training methods that could lead to high-level transcendence were no longer commercially available. These secret methods were strictly controlled by scholars. He hadn't been able to obtain a copy in 6 months, and he had reached a bottleneck in his practice of Howard's poisoning technique and heavy rock fist, with little improvement despite his practice. Liu Ming now had dark blue poison marks even between his fingernails. From the initial serpent's kiss to the later lava poison, and now even the only high-level poison he could mass produce, lava poison, the improvement in his strength had become negligible. He knew he had reached the limit of his strength, beyond which it could only be rapidly improved. After leaving the ruins, Liu Ming still couldn't stop thinking about the yellow sandworm swarm that had disappeared. He ordered the pangolin to continue searching for the yellow sandworms along the last node of their previous excavation. The other blood beasts scattered, continuing their search in all directions. Liu Ming, still holding his sword, stood directly above the pangolin, deep underground, to detect any movement. He also summoned Cayman to stand guard, and he and the Phantom Diver stood guard on either side of him. Squeak. Squeak. Suddenly, the blood beast pangolin's slightly rapid calls echoed from underground. A discovery? Liu Ming's eyes flashed with joy. His blood beast minions would never strike without a target. The blood beast pangolin was moving rapidly. Liu Ming also began to speed up, following the blood beast. In his mind, Liu Ming could sense the pangolin's speed increasing. At first, he could keep up with the pangolin's speed at a brisk walk, then he had to trot, and finally, he had to run, just to keep up with the blood beast's minions. Found it. Must have found the insect swarm's tunnel. If the pangolin was still digging its way through the ground on its own, its speed wouldn't be this fast. This left only one explanation. It was navigating a pre-existing tunnel dug by the insect swarm. Liu Ming felt a surge of excitement. He could almost see the insect swarm appearing before him. While tracking the pangolin's speed, Liu Ming began to rally his army of blood beasts, which were still searching. As the blood beasts slowly gathered around Liu Ming, the pangolin's speed slowed. It was no longer moving forward, but upward, emitting a frightened, anxious twang. The ground trembled faintly. Liu Ming seemed to sense something, and he and the blood beasts braced for the pangolin's appearance. Bang! The pangolin's 4 large claws swung rapidly, instantly carving a tunnel just wide enough for it to pass through and emerging. But that wasn't the end of it. Behind it, cylindrical black shadows shot out one after another. Upon seeing the shadowy figures, Liu Ming was stunned for a moment, then a cruel smile curled his lips as he chuckled happily. "Bugs, we finally found you." With a swish, several flashes of silvery white blades flashed, and the yellow sandworms chasing the pangolin were instantly shattered into pieces. More yellow sandworms continued to emerge from the cave, and soon, piles of corpses appeared around the cave in trance. Finally, after leaving behind hundreds of corpses, the insect swarm finally realized something was wrong, and, guided by a mysterious consciousness, stopped rushing out to die. Seeing the yellow sandworms disappear, Liu Ming dismissed the situation. With a wave of his hand, a grey-black flame erupted, instantly incinerating the corpses into ash. A few insect crystals remained, lying quietly in the charred ashes. Liu Ming laughed heartily, collected the insect crystals, pointed triumphantly at the cave in trance, and commanded the pangolin, who had just escaped the insect's mouth, "Lead the way, let's fight back." Chapter 238, Yellow Sandworm Nest, The Wrath of Nature, Part 2. A somewhat disheveled pangolin, its body covered in wounds from yellow sandworm bites, braced itself and prepared to begin clearing the way. Following its master's instructions, it had already discovered the insect nest. With a wave of Kamenwen's hand, a silent light of tranquility descended, and the pangolin's wounds healed at a visible rate. The pangolin, sensing its wounds healing, led the way even more vigorously. Led by the pangolin, Liu Ming and his army of blood beasts finally discovered the yellow sandworm's lair amidst the rubble. The pangolin pointed with its claws at a massive, collapsed building in the distance, indicating they were inside. Liu Ming frowned. The building was enormous, and had collapsed at an angle, its walls crumbling into ruins, making it impossible to find an entrance. It seemed the insect's lair lay beneath the rubble. If so, the pangolin was the only one present who could dig its way into the nest. The others were simply out of reach, and could only wait for the yellow sandworms to emerge, and die before they could attack them. Just as Liu Ming was at his wit's end, Kamenwen approached and offered him a try. A flicker of doubt crossed Liu Ming's eyes. Relying solely on the deadly thorns to summon giant plants wouldn't be enough to conquer the ruins of the collapsed ancient buildings. After all, even with the power of the nature's crown, the plants would only last 10 minutes. They wouldn't be able to move more than a few walls before they collapsed. However, he chose to trust his heroic spirit, even if it meant wasting some energy. For the time being, there was no other solution. I need to bury these insects deep beneath the rubble. Kamenwen pulled out a handful of seeds and handed them to Liu Ming. Liu Ming, vaguely guessing something, asked, "What do you want?" "Sir, the power of nature is boundless." Kamenwen smiled enigmatically and fell silent. Liu Ming again called the pangolin, whose wounds had just healed, over and stuffed all the seeds into its mouth, repeatedly instructing it not to swallow them, and to spit them out into the rubble. The pangolin nodded, half understanding, and turned to run towards the ruins. Then, he swiftly dug a hole and burrowed down. A moment later, when the pangolin emerged with its bulging mouth deflated, Liu Ming knew the first step of his plan had succeeded. Excellent, leave it to me next. Kamenwen also seemed excited, apparently eager for the psychic energy of the insect crystals. Plant seeds buried deep in the dark earth begin to break free from the constraints of darkness and reach towards the sunlight. Silent light, whisper of nature, growth, crown of nature. Break the ground, children of nature. Kamenwen unleashed all 4 of his innate abilities related to plant growth in one breath. Green starlight, like falling stars, showered the ruins of the collapsed building, the lair of the yellow sandworms. As these starlights burrowed deeper into the ground from the rubble, boom, boom, boom. Then, a terrifying roar, like the movement of the earth's crust, rose from the depths, as if a formidable force was brewing beneath the earth. An overwhelming force emerged from the earth. The sound of thumps and thumps continued. Boom. The first hint of green emerged from the ruins, a signal of progress. Countless green plants followed, each one bursting forth from the ground. The only difference between these plants and ordinary plants was their sheer size, some even larger than the giant snake vines. Some of them reached hundreds of meters above the ground, but after emerging from the earth, they began to disintegrate. These giant plants must have used extreme methods to unleash their full vitality, which is why, as ordinary plants, they exhibit such fleeting and impressive growth. The giant plants emerged like bamboo shoots after rain. Within a few dozen breaths, no fewer than 100 plants had broken through the rock wall. The crumbling building, a roadblock, was riddled with holes and tottered under the plants' assault. Holes, wide enough for several people to walk through simultaneously, appeared on the surface. Soon after emerging, the plants that had emerged from the burrows withered and withered, leaving behind only vast pits. At the end of these holes, the yellow sandworm's lair was likely the site of the yellow sandworm. Liu Ming took a deep breath, his fully restored vitality surging forth. The power of the evil dragon spell enveloped him, and the glow of a dragon flame flickered. He led the phantom songstress into a pit leading to the lair. He brought her along out of fear that the tiny creature would escape. He was very pleased with this little servant, and he would not let her go until he had fully exploited her surplus value. His bulging luggage suggested that he had a considerable inventory, though most of the items had yet to find their true use. Descending down the pitch black pit, Liu Ming finally arrived at a vast underground space. It was a cavernous space, resembling a honeycomb of chambers. There were probably no fewer than 1,000 chambers, large and small, filled with dense swarms of yellow sandworms. The entire underground lair was vast and tens of meters high. Liu Ming, the phantom songstress, and hundreds of blood beast minions slid down and stood before the massive nest. The yellow sandworms had clearly noticed Liu Ming and his uninvited guests, and they let out shrill screams as they swarmed towards him. Liu Ming cried out, fortunately, and his entire body erupted in flames, like a human torch, wielding a sword to face the oncoming swarm. Crackling and sizzling sounds echoed continuously, and each yellow sandworm was burned to a crisp before it could even reach him, their bodies utterly dead. The evil dragon curse power surrounding him blasted out like cannonballs, seemingly endlessly. With each explosion, a small group of insects flew back, engulfed in a strange evil flame, and suffering, unable to even think of dying. The massacre not only stunned the ever tsundere phantom diva, but as a local creature, she was naturally familiar with the yellow sandworms. While she wasn't afraid of these inept bugs, she certainly couldn't slaughter them with the same recklessness as Liu Ming. The massive insect nest also responded to Liu Ming's provocative massacre on its doorstep, with a dizzying buzzing sound. A tidal wave of yellow sandworms poured out from the nest's dark chambers. This time, the swarm was not only tens or even hundreds of times larger than before, but many of them were even more powerful. Liu Ming's expression also changed from his previous casual expression, becoming somewhat solemn and serious. His eyes focused, and he gripped the hilt of his knife tightly. Ants can kill elephants, but don't let your boat capsize in the gutter. Chapter 239, 9-star absolute edge, corpse pile and insect mountain. Amidst a burst of rapid chirping, the yellow sandworms swarmed, like mad towards the uninvited guests, led by Liu Ming. Scattered among the vast swarm of dark yellow worms, their bodies encased in dark yellow shells, were a few giant yellow sandworms, clad in black shells, surpassing their companions in both size and ferocity. These black sandworms were several times the size of ordinary yellow sandworms. While other worms were the thickness of an average adult's thigh to waist, these black sandworms were as thick as buckets, large ones at that, resembling a swiftly slithering python. Each black beetle's bean-sized eyes gleamed fiercely as they stared intently at Liu Ming, the leader of the uninvited guests, seemingly recognizing him as their leader. Not only were they fixated on Liu Ming, but his gaze was also drawn to these bizarrely shaped yellow sandworms. Waves of evil dragon spell power, as if descending from another dimension into this one, emerged around him one after another. When the vanguard of the swarm was still 30 or 40 meters away from him, a dense mass of 40 or 50 palm-sized pieces of evil dragon mantra appeared. Gray-black tokens rained down upon the swarm, like heavy artillery shells. Boom, boom, boom. Violent explosions and crashes echoed continuously, with most of the evil dragon mantra directed specifically at the larger, more formidable black and yellow sandworms that had caught Liu Ming's attention. As the evil dragon mantra pounded and the ashen fire exploded, the black and yellow sandworms were bruised by the shockwaves. Then, clung to the ashen fire, they gradually halted their charge with a piercing hiss. Like a python engulfed in blazing flames, the black and yellow sandworms twitched, rolled, and thrashed amid the swarm. Many of the yellow sandworms that were unable to evade the attack suffered, many being accidentally mauled to pieces by their powerful comrades. Even those who managed to avoid the direct blows were nearly killed by the ashen fire, and those caught by them were nearly dead. As the evil dragon's spell blasted forth, hundreds of blood beasts unleashed their ranged attacks. Countless breaths, particularly those of fire, erupted as if expending no energy. Soon, after a frenzied bombardment, 1/5 of the attacking insect swarm had been eliminated. Some of the yellow sandworms, caught in the chain reaction of explosions, became dazed and even tumbled on the ground, unable to recover. Liu Ming, sensing his opportunity, immediately shifted from passive defense to active attack. Hundreds of blood beasts followed his mighty charge, charging towards the insect swarm. Cayman raised his wooden staff, and giant saw-toothed man-eating grass and serpentine vines emerged from the ground once more. The phantom songstress, setting aside the large backpack she'd plucked from some unfortunate soul who'd perished while exploring the ruins, began to sing a moving yet murderous song. Ripping, squeaking, Vicious, foul-smelling insect juice and blood beast blood splattered everywhere. The two sides engaged in a brutal close quarters melee. Liu Ming constantly roamed around the location of the black and yellow sandworms. His presence invariably killed at least one of them. Those monsters, whose black shells were nearly impossible to break through, and their bodies damaged by the rot beasts, were like fresh tofu before a freshly sharpened kitchen knife. Their defenses were barely pierced before Liu Ming's absolute blade, their bodies ripped apart before a second blow. They were then dismembered, their bodies finally slain by a final burst of ash and flame. Liu Ming also fully exploited the absolute blade's killing power. As the swarm of killer insects grew, the blade of the absolute blade, stained with murky yellow blood and juice, grew darker and darker. What he failed to notice was that the golden lines on the blade, created by absorbing the mysterious golden crystals, began to rapidly dissolve the instant the dark red appeared. It was as if, catalyzed by a mysterious force, the golden lines were rapidly merging into the blade. Under Liu Ming's perceptive power, the absolute blade's rank was rising at an incredible rate. Gray 4 stars, Gray 5 stars. The absolute blade's rank slowly climbed to Gray 8 stars before finally stopping at Gray 9 stars. Gray 9 stars. In the past 6 months, Liu Ming's countless kills have only earned the absolute blade a single star, but I never expected it to reach Gray 9 stars now. This is already the limit for Gray items. A first level transcendent can usually fully master and unleash the full power of an item. What surprised Liu Ming slightly was that the once silver absolute blade had now turned silver with a hint of gold. The blade itself was a dark red with a blackish hue. He swung his sword again, slashing at the black sandworms with even greater ease. Even when the swarm attacked, he held his sword horizontally to block the attacking sandworms, instantly slicing them in half as they collided with the blade, without him having to lift a finger. This astonished him. The shells of these creatures were as strong as iron, yet how could they be so brittle as white paper? It wasn't their fragility, but the sheer sharpness of the absolute blade. Liu Ming couldn't help but smile with satisfaction as he thought about it, chopping and slashing with even greater enthusiasm. Ashes and flames burned directly on the absolute edge, reaching several meters high. Every time the meter-long flaming blade sliced through the air, it left a scorched streak in the air. The piles of insects transformed into flaming torches. Gone. Liu Ming suddenly wondered. He saw insect carcasses piled up like a mountain around him. He stood atop the corpses, brandishing his flaming giant blade. No more yellow sandworms emerged from the vast insect nest. Either the yellow sandworm nest was empty, or they had learned to hide their strength. Liu Ming put aside his thoughts for the moment, and began to count his gains and losses, taking a short rest. He was exhausted from the killing spree of just over 2/4 of an hour, 3 hours in total. He had been holding on for dear life. Now, as he paused, his muscles, relaxed from the tension, cramped. He first counted his blood beast minions. Out of 139, only 27 remained, almost all of them flying. All the other blood beasts fell silently into the pile of corpses, just like the insect corpses. This made him want to cry but couldn't. The sharp decline in the number of blood beasts under his command forced him to turn his attention to the pile of insect corpses. He didn't know if these half-elemental, half-flesh yellow sandworms could be summoned by his blood beasts and transformed into blood beasts. Fortunately, the Phantom Diva was not on the death list, but the backpack that she cherished like a treasure had been buried at the bottom of the pile of corpses. At this time, it was flapping its little wings around the pile of corpses, as if it was very nervous about the luggage containing its treasures. Liu Ming saw the anxious look on the little guy's face, but after confirming that it was okay and not injured, he smiled and stopped paying attention. He began to try to summon blood beasts through the yellow sandworms. Chapter 240 Mysterious Crystal, Yellow Sandworm Queen. The magical power of summoning blood beasts, originating from the Scholar Hand, naturally had its limitations. Since Liu Ming was going to test it, he naturally chose to test it on the strongest looking black and yellow sandworms. This way, the summoned blood beasts would be even more powerful. Amidst the rich, almost liquid-like bloodlight, the insect corpses, still unburned by the ash fire, began to react. As the bloodlight swirled, waves of blood rose and fell like ripples on the surface of water. A dark red serpentine creature wriggled within the bloody light. With a chuckle, the black and yellow sandworm, though broken into 4 or 5 pieces and relatively intact compared to its companions, suddenly split open. A slightly smaller figure emerged. It was a cylindrical monster, headless and tailless, covered in a black and red carapace. If it weren't for its wriggling movements, it would have looked dead. However, Liu Ming sensed the creature's friendly, submissive, and dependent nature, and knew his summoning had succeeded. This was a genuine blood beast, albeit a somewhat strange one. There were distinct slits at each end. When Liu Ming commanded him to open them, a terrifying scene unfolded. As the slits ripped open, two chrysanthemum-shaped mouths, studded with sharp, blood-red fangs, appeared. The ferocious jaws unconsciously and randomly bit at the 2 pieces of rubble, instantly reducing them to a heap of stone dust. Liu Ming squinted and sighed. It's quite powerful, but it looks a bit scary. He paused, stroking his thick beard, and continued, a bit scary. Keep going. He searched for the second, relatively intact black sandworm. A moment later, when Kamenwan summoned a massive vine to dislodge the pile of insect carcasses, Liu Ming had already summoned 10 monsters, tentatively named yellow sand pteromoths. They were called pteromoths because their mouths were so terrifying that even he found them a bit unsightly. Each of these sand pteromouths was as thick as an adult's waist, with tiny insect legs beneath its belly, resembling a series of pythons. Their strength was likely at least equal to that of his 3 previous blood beasts. Unfortunately, in the recent battle, his 3 strongest blood beasts, due to their superior strength, had been the first to be attacked by the insect swarm, and were now ripped to pieces, beyond mortal combat. However, these 10 sand pteromouths brought him some comfort. However, these new minions were all terrestrial, not only enormous but also flightless. This made Liu Ming somewhat melancholic as he prepared to explore other ruins. The ruins in the Night Crown Ancient Ruins complex were suspended and separated, with distances of at least several hundred meters between them. These creatures couldn't just leap across. But now was not the time to dwell on such thoughts. The mountain of corpses had been cleared, and Liu Ming continued to summon them. Eventually, 26 sand pteromouths appeared neatly behind him, their numbers reduced only to his remaining blood beasts. After summoning all the blood beasts, Liu Ming began to review the fruits of his victory. One by one, the crystals from the dead sandworms were unearthed, and soon, a massive pile of crystals formed before Kamenwan. If there were no more sandworms in this nest, these crystals would be the spoils of Liu Ming and his men's slaughter of the entire sandworm colony. Fortunately, these creatures fear fire, otherwise this seemingly shattered victory would have most likely ended in a crushing defeat. Kamenwan, you take this guy, and stay here to guard the crystals, while I explore the nest. Liu Ming Heyo, obsessed with the massive sandworm nest before him, gave this instruction, handed him the phantom diver, left a group of flying blood beasts, and headed towards the nest with his newly acquired group of sand terror beasts. As soon as they entered the nest, a stench of decay and dampness hit them. Buried deep underground, the nest had been dark for years, making it naturally quite dim. Liu Ming's flame dragon cloak shone slightly, and a flame burned on his shoulder, acting as a torch for illumination. Entering the hive, the path was smooth and unobstructed, without a single yellow sandworm in sight. It looked like these poor creatures were about to be exterminated by me, Liu Ming thought to himself. The deeper he went into the hive, the stronger the stench of decay grew. The passageways within the hive were extremely narrow, designed for the crawling yellow sandworms, so walking was naturally difficult for Liu Ming. As for his minions, the yellow sand terror beasts, however, they moved easily. Finally, the view opened up. Liu Ming emerged from the narrow passageway into a massive hive. The hive was littered with sticky oval-shaped insect eggs that reeked of decay. In the center of the eggs, a diamond-shaped crystal, nearly a man's height, hovered in mid-air. Seeing the crystal, Liu Ming's heart trembled, his mind momentarily froze. Then came an overwhelming surge of joy. With his astonishing perception, how could he not notice that the crystal was filled with a highly pure spiritual substance? Its purity was undoubtedly far superior to the piece Kamenwan had previously devoured. But in an instant, Liu Ming regained his composure. The lure of immense profit inevitably carries immense danger. Liu Ming gazed at the seemingly within reach of the ectoplasm crystal, seemingly lost in thought. Go. Liu Ming pointed to a nearby crystal and ordered one of his men, a terror beak, to retrieve it for him. The terror beak crawled over a strewn mass of sticky insect eggs. Its massive body emitted a continuous popping sound, crushing and bursting each egg under its weight. In a dozen breaths, it reached the base of the massive crystal. The crystal hovered only a few meters above the ground. The terror beak reared up, ready to carry away the rare treasure. Suddenly, a lightning-fast black shadow struck, striking the terror beak before it could resist. The immense force sent its body, weighing perhaps 1,000 kilograms, flying backward, slamming into the membrane wall of the nest, severely wounding it, and temporarily unable to move. Only then did Liu Ming get a clearer look at the attacking figure. It was a massive creature hidden within an egg. It resembled the black sandworm, only at least 10 times larger. Furthermore, its rear half was bloated, like an overgrown queen ant or queen bee. I'd never heard of a sandworm colony in the ruins having a queen. Liu Ming was puzzled. No, perhaps it wasn't that there wasn't a queen. It was simply that she hadn't been discovered. Furthermore, the theory that these sandworms possess hallucinogenic abilities stemmed from a collective consciousness was also a scholar's theory. There was no factual basis for this claim, and it was likely that their hallucinogenic abilities were closely linked to this massive ectoplasm crystal. Liu Ming wasn't fazed by the ferocious appearance of the sandworm queen, still pondering some illogical considerations. When he regained his composure, he looked back at the queen and the massive crystal, licking his lips with a hint of greed. You're mine, and your precious is mine too. Chapter 241 Earthquakes, Dead Trees and Branches. Deep in the gloomy darkness of the earth, Liu Ming's chest rose and fell, accompanied by the throbbing of his heartbeat. As his powerful heart, encased in a core of molten lava, beat, his blood and strength were constantly transported and compressed throughout his body. A pair of blazing, fiery wings instantly unfolded behind Liu Ming. With the flapping of his flame dragon wings, he swooped down upon the massive yellow sandworm queen, carrying a fiery aura and boundless heat. The yellow sandworm queen trembled, hissing and charging at Liu Ming. Boom. The shocking collision between the behemoth and Liu Ming was as deafening as a violent explosion. A cloud of dust billowed from the giant nest. Amidst the smoke and dust, a figure shot backwards, seemingly at a disadvantage in the collision. However, when the smoke and dust dispersed, a terrifying scar appeared on the behemoth's abdomen, its shape etched and distinct. The wounds were clearly the result of the destructive blows of the swords and knives during the recent clash. Meanwhile, Liu Ming's razor-sharp blade, now a 9-star grey weapon, began to reveal its ferocity. Turbid yellow insect fluid dripped continuously from the blade's edge, and a foul odor filled the air. With a flick of his wrist, the blade gently shook twice, and the blood and insect fluid was shaken off by the immense force radiating from the handle. Whoosh! The remaining dirt and insect fluid vanished without a trace in the intense flames of the flame dragon wing cloak. Liu Ming's wings fluttered again, and streams of crimson flames enveloped him. Like an eagle hunting, he swooped down from the air. He thrust the blade forward, striking with all his might. Bang! Like the sound of a heavy object being struck, another precise blow echoed. The yellow sandworm, repeatedly struck and wounded by Liu Ming's razor-sharp blade, grew even more ferocious. However, the raging yellow sandworm queen's strength didn't improve much. Soon, under the barrage of Liu Ming's dozens of evil dragon spells, she finally collapsed to the ground. With a single, excited stride, Liu Ming rushed to the base of the mysterious crystal. Then, with a deep leap, he clambered onto the crystal, a full man's height. Boom. Boom. A roar, even more intense than the most intense clash between Liu Ming and the yellow sandworm queen, echoed, accompanied by a powerful earth-shaking tremor. Liu Ming thought to himself, it's not good. Although he realized the sudden change might be related to his attempt to remove the floating crystal, he felt a wave of intense tremors that felt like the earth was about to crack, yet he exerted all his strength to pry the crystal free. Hefting the massive crystal above his head, Liu Ming scurried out of the giant insect nest. Go. Upon reaching the outside, he saw Kamen Wen and the Phantom Diva still guarding a pile of yellow sandworm crystals. He shouted anxiously, his voice slightly distorted. He desperately missed that magical camera that could store things. It was a shame it hadn't come with him when he arrived in this world. Otherwise, Liu Ming wouldn't have had to worry about finding food and water along the way. He wouldn't have worried about carrying away these piles of worm crystals. He could have simply taken out his magical camera and started snapping away. But reality didn't allow for so many ifs. He could only direct his men to take as many yellow sandworm crystals as possible before the final disaster struck. This was the turning point for Kamenwen's evolution. Even standing on the ground, one could clearly feel the tremors, like an earthquake. Leave now. A palpitation washed over him. Not daring to linger any longer, Liu Ming quickly ordered the flying blood beasts to lift the yellow sand terror beasts out of the underground. As for the yellow sand terror beasts, that couldn't be taken with them. Kamenwen summoned giant plants to carry them up. When everyone successfully reached the surface from underground, loud rumblings echoed from the ground one after another. Then, the pits collapsed, instantly burying the entire yellow sandworm nest. Many of the relatively intact ruins within the ruins suddenly collapsed again. After the flying blood beasts had soared out of the massive underground pit, they set down the incredibly heavy yellow sand thriller beast. Finally, Liu Ming and his men found a safe, temporary resting spot within the ruins. While dozens of blood beasts, save for the guards, had almost all stopped to rest, Liu Ming remained the only one still counting his harvest. Although the vast piles of insect crystals were ultimately largely buried beneath the rubble, the sheer volume he and his blood beasts had brought back was still immense. Unfortunately, at the moment the tremor struck, he only had time to remove the mysterious crystal, leaving him no time to explore the corpse of the yellow sandworm. Liu Ming gazed at the pile of no fewer than 1,000 insect crystals before him, picked one up, and silently felt it in his palm. As he continuously drew upon the ectoplasmic energy within the insect crystals, he could feel his perception and sixth senses growing stronger with the influx of energy within them. As Liu Ming's face brimmed with satisfaction, a single insect crystal was completely absorbed, transforming into a transparent ordinary crystal. Liu Ming quickly called for Kamenwen to join him in absorbing the spiritual energy within the insect crystal. Carrying these items was cumbersome and impractical. He felt that absorbing them all would make exploring the ruins much easier. As Kamenwen continued to absorb the insect crystals, the green star-shaped points of light surrounding him grew in number. Eventually, Kamenwen was completely enveloped in green light, as if enveloped by a vast cocoon of light. A rich vitality and an endless supply of natural energy emanated from the green cocoon. Like a giant seed, the cocoon was nurturing a unique life. Seeing the cocoon take shape, Liu Ming paused to absorb the insect crystals, silently observing its movements. Bang! As he waited, the cocoon suddenly shattered, sending countless streams of green light scattering like fireflies. Kamenwen reappeared before Liu Ming. Kamenwen's appearance was not much different from before. The green hair had turned a full-bodied dark green. The number of green stars lingering around him had at least doubled. The most noticeable change was the wooden staff in his hand. The withered staff now resembled a lush green branch, tightly grasped in Kamenwen's palm. A rich aura of life and nature emanated from the verdant branches, demonstrating the staff's extraordinary nature. Kamenwen's aura was now far more refined and powerful than before. Kamenwen, you've evolved. Liu Ming asked in surprise and delight. He couldn't believe Kamenwen had evolved from C rank to A rank in such a short time. My guardian, I have successfully advanced. Kamenwen nodded, smiling and acknowledging Liu Ming. Kamenwen's affirmation further shocked Liu Ming, making him believe that for a heroic spirit, rocket-like advancement wouldn't be difficult. All it took was sufficient spiritual matter or ectoplasm energy. Chapter 242, Debris in the Wind, the corroded beast Kanghook. Just as Liu Ming felt a surge of joy at his guardian heroic spirit's successive advancements, he, pressured by a shortage of food and water, prepared to explore another block of ruins. He had already nearly exhausted this block, finding no food or water, and no clues to the disappearance of Eren's parents. 2 months later, the snow and wind gradually faded, and the ice and snow began to melt. Liu Ming had been in this world for nearly 8 months, and had been exploring the perilous Night Crown ruins for 2 months. His blood beasts were rapidly changing. By now, the yellow sand terrormouths summoned by the black sandworm swarm in the first block had died, leaving only 6 remaining for future use. As for the other flying blood beasts, casualties were less. After all, the different blocks were only accessible by flight. Therefore, unless the situation was critical, he would routinely order the land-based blood beasts to attack first, while the flying blood beasts would engage in ranged attacks, or remain on standby. Killing a flying creature to summon a blood beast within the Nightcrown Ancient Ruins is a significant undertaking, and navigating the various ruins blocks requires flying monsters. Therefore, flying blood beasts naturally became his primary target of protection. Over the past 2 months of continuous searching, Liu Ming, aided by the ever-increasing blood beast army, began to make subtle discoveries about former ruin explorers. During a sudden gust of wind, Liu Ming's most sensitive blood beast, summoned from the corpse of a rotting wolf, detected a distinctive scent in the gust of wind. Before officially embarking on his exploration of the ruins, Liu Ming had visited the Half-Mountain Manor and once again met with Errands, the nominal heir to the estate, who was now in decline. Her power had been largely eroded by the powerful within the manor, and she had been forcibly placed on the throne like a puppet, manipulated like a marionette. This was the current state of the young master of the Half-Mountain Manor. Even Liu Ming's attempt to enter Banshan Manor and meet the young master was met with resistance. Arons was imprisoned in a small courtyard, guarded by no fewer than 10 transcendents, and no one was allowed to enter or leave. Liu Ming sneaked in, however, and encountered a emaciated Arons, nearly despairing of life. But upon hearing that Liu Ming was officially taking over the mission and exploring the ruins for clues about her missing parents, she regained her spirits, as if in a last gasp. Liu Ming's purpose in the infiltration, besides further understanding the mission requirements and details about the Nightcrown Ancient Ruins, was to obtain personal belongings of the missing Banshan Manor man and woman, items imbued with their aura. After all, the ruins were vast, and attempting to find 2 missing individuals, missing for almost a year, within such a vast complex was like trying to catch the moon in the ocean, or looking through a mirror. The probability was infinitely low. However, since he had no choice, Liu Ming had to pursue any clues he could find. Tracking the scent left by its owner is a unique ability possessed by some special creatures with a keen sense of smell. Liu Ming, a wolf-like blood beast with a highly sensitive sense of smell, naturally possessed remarkable abilities in this area. This was the 10th block of ruins he had explored, and here, finally, a clue appeared. It was some grey debris drifting in the wind, and it was on these that the blood beast detected the same scent as the clothing Errands had given him, belonging to his parents. As he pursued the debris, Liu Ming's pace slowed. He felt a constant sense of impending danger. Roar. Finally, an incredibly violent and brutal roar suddenly erupted on the road ahead. The wolf-like blood beast leading the way was the first to be struck by a thick, strange tail. It was a strange creature with a crescent-shaped hook at the end of its tail. But when Liu Ming saw the true form of the attacking creature, he took a deep breath, his muscles tensing, as if facing a formidable enemy. If the primary threat to this world were the monsters that roamed the wilds, occupying nearly the entire area outside the oasis, they would be the pervasive threat. The corruption race was the most formidable representative of them all. The corruption beast was a low-level form of the corruption clan. The erosion beast, its advanced evolution, was the corruption beast's most advanced form. Almost every erosion beast possessed destructive power and combat prowess at least comparable to that of a high-level knight. Over the past 6 months, Liu Ming had encountered countless mid-level knights, but only one high-level transcendent had truly witnessed one in action. Wolf Sword Cuman, the supreme guardian of the Dark Knight Forest forward base. The erosion beast before him was a terrifying monster of the same caliber. A high-level knight, according to Earth's evolutionary classification, was definitely at the 2nd level. The highest level on his side was only Cayman Wen, a newly promoted 1st A level. Based on the information Liu Ming had gathered about the corruption race over the past 6 months, this erosion beast was likely a relatively rare species, the Kang Hook beast. Covered in dark green scales, its tail resembled an iron hook, its legs were massive and powerful, and its claws were razor sharp. Records indicate that this monster's only weakness was its abdomen. The Kangal beast's underbelly was shimmering white, its weakest point. Its entire white underbelly lacked a single piece of hard armor. Beyond that, its entire body was covered in dark green scales, resembling a war beast clad in armor. Liu Ming was facing off against this modest yet exceptionally majestic erosion beast. His hordes of blood beasts roamed the surrounding area, ready to charge, as soon as the battle began. Even a high-level erosion beast comparable to a second-tier beast might be able to hold its own against a siege of rot beasts several times its size. However, when the outnumbered beasts reached 10 or even dozens of times their size, it could easily become a situation where an ant could kill an elephant. After a brief standoff, the Kangal beast lost its composure. With a simple flick of its scorpion-like tail hook, it instantly struck and flung several blood beasts lurking in the herd. Seeing this, Liu Ming frowned, a look of shock on his face. The Kangal beast's tail hook swept across with a simple sweep, like a flash of lightning, sending 4 or 5 blood beasts flying. One even succumbed to a rather large blood beast, pierced through by the Kangal beast's tail hook, leaving it hanging from the hook, blood gurgling down its length. Apparently aware of the beast's heaviness, the Kangal beast simply pierced the massive beast's body and casually tossed it to the ground, leaving it alone. Just as he shifted his murderous gaze to his next target, Liu Ming struck. Chapter 243, using all possible means, getting injured and running away. Liu Ming drew his sword, gripped it tightly in his left hand, and stepped forward, firmly blocking the way of the Kangal beast's next target. As expected, seeing its intended target prevented and blocked, the Kangal beast abandoned its pursuit of the blood beasts and charged directly at Liu Ming. While the corruption beasts acted solely on instinct, the erosion beasts, as their evolved form, possessed rudimentary intelligence. Therefore, the Kangal beast could discern that Liu Ming was the leader of the current foe. Despite being a terrifying, possibly second-level monster, Liu Ming remained unfazed. However, he also chose not to engage it head-on. A stream of light emerged from his wings, and he retreated to avoid the Kangal beast's confident and powerful attack. Boom. The Kangal beast's attack missed thanks to Liu Ming's effective evasion. However, driven by its immense inertia, the Kangal beast plummeted into a pile of rubble and rock. The shattered walls suddenly shattered, as if struck by a heavy artillery shell, sending a shower of rubble and dust flying everywhere. In reality, this was merely a second-tier terror. The furious attack of the high-level erosion beast unleashed a devastating blow. The Kangal beast also plunged headfirst into the rubble. Liu Ming vigilantly watched the massive hole created by the blast. The Kangal beast's sturdy body slowly emerged from the hole with a few leaps. Though its body was covered in dust and debris, looking somewhat disheveled, Liu Ming knew the collision and explosion had been nothing more than a minor incident, barely scratching its fur. While truly injuring this monster would be extremely difficult, sitting back and waiting for death, passively defending and dodging, was not Liu Ming's nature. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Waves of evil dragon spell power, laced with intense heat, shot towards the Kangal beast with a series of piercing sounds. Rumble. Having just crawled out of the hole it had blasted, the Kangal beast was instantly subjected to another baptism of intense heat and explosion, creating an even larger hole. The Kangal beast roared furiously and fell back into the hole. Fortunately, erosion beasts like the Kangal beast lack the ability to fly. Otherwise, it would have been far more formidable. This was Liu Ming's bottom line. If he had encountered a flying erosion beast, Liu Ming would have likely turned and fled. However, when faced with an erosion beast like the Kangal beast, which could only run on land and lacked the ability to fly, Liu Ming's worst case scenario was to abandon some of his blood beast minions and take to the air with the flying blood beasts to escape. Therefore, he had the confidence to fight it. If he couldn't defeat it, he could flee. At least he wouldn't lose his life. If he was lucky enough and had exceptional luck and could defeat this Kangal beast, Liu Ming was eagerly anticipating the blood beast he could summon using it as material. Based on the current summoning patterns, the blood beast he summoned would likely be only a small level weaker than the original material when it was alive. Therefore, even if it was only a mediocre Kangal beast, the blood beast he summoned would most likely be a level 2 blood beast. With a level 2 Kangao blood beast, even if he couldn't run rampant in this dangerous ruins, where even great knights might disappear, his ability to protect himself would undoubtedly improve. With these thoughts in mind, a glint of heat flashed in Liu Ming's eyes. His grip on the absolute blade tightened again, and wisps of grey-black flames began to ignite from the blade's tip, slowly spreading from the tip to the hilt. Eventually, not only did the absolute blade transform into a flaming long sword, but Liu Ming's entire left arm was engulfed in a blazing ash fire. Fortunately, the flame dragon wing cloak was also a divinely gifted item with extremely high fire properties, otherwise it would have been completely unaffected by the burning ash fire. With a clatter, the Kangao beast, with its incredible springing power, leaped out of the hole again. As it began to shake off the dust and rocks on its body, Liu Ming's eyes flashed with a fierce look, and he, wielding the flame absolute blade, dove and slashed like a fire god. The surrounding land blood beasts quickly followed their master, encircling the Kangao beast and attacking it. Not far away, Kaimanwen also raised his staff. Endless green light converged at its tip, and the faint shadow of a towering tree, piercing the sky and earth, emerged from the staff, fleeting like a phantom. Then, countless green lights converged into a green energy matrix, and a terrifying vine, over 5 meters in diameter, emerged from it, shooting towards the blue hook beast at lightning speed. The phantom diver also hummed a hypnotic song, which was barely effective on the blue hook beast. Bang, bang, bang. The evil dragon spell struck the blue hook beast first. The blue hook beast didn't dodge or avoid it, a hint of human disdain on its lips, simply raising a massive claw to block it. The evil dragon spell, condensed with the power of ash and evil fire, repeatedly collided with its massive claw, covered in dark green scales. Rumbling sounds continued, but after the explosions, the claw remained unscathed. Not even a single dark green scale had been blown away. Of course, the evil dragon's curse wasn't the main force. Liu Ming then attacked with a sharp flaming blade formed from the ash and flames of the flames. This time, the Kangao beast seemed to sense danger, and sped towards Liu Ming, its tail hook raised high, ready to strike through his skull. However, the giant vine summoned by Kaimanwen was faster than Liu Ming, wrapping itself around the Kangao beast, which was still running and accelerating. Liu Ming was overjoyed. By then, the Kangao beast had leaped to its feet, revealing a small glimpse of its white underbelly, covered in scales. Liu Ming seized this fleeting opportunity, unleashing the blood energy of his right scalded hand to its fullest, while his left hand unleashed the power of his molten heart. Combining the two, he slashed fiercely at the Kangao beast's seemingly weak underbelly. Rip. The blade fell. The Kangao beast struggled frantically. The absolute blade, a 9-star grey blade, had completely slashed through its abdominal defenses. Though the incision was small, only an elbow long, and shallow, likely only half a finger's length, Liu Ming remained energized. He felt capable of injuring the Kangao beast, especially with the absolute blade in hand. If he continued this way, little by little, and nothing unexpected happened, the Kangao beast would surely be utterly crushed to death. He could injure it once now, but if he attacked the same wound again, he would have a good chance of tearing open the wound in its abdomen. Once the wound ripped, its internal organs would be damaged, even leaking out in the heat of battle. That would be a fatal threat to this formidable erosion beast. The Kangao beast, seemingly sensing its own wound, began to struggle frantically. The giant vines summoned by Kaimanwen were torn apart by it within a breath of Liu Ming's success. The freed beast slapped several attacking blood beasts to pieces, then cast a glare of hatred and brutality at Liu Ming, the instigator of its harm. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 244, Tailhook Poison, Life-Threatening Escape. Liu Ming discovered that, in this world, few humans below the level of high-level transcendence were able to awaken their bloodlines and master their abilities. However, this finding clearly didn't apply to the monsters and corrupted races found everywhere in the wild. These powerful individuals generally possessed one or more remarkable racial bloodline abilities. For example, The Kangol beast, now frantically attacking Liu Ming, was a formidable creature with numerous racial abilities. Records indicate that the Kangol beast possessed abilities such as bloodthirsty frenzy and deadly venom. In battle, it could trigger a bloodthirsty frenzy through slaughter. Its tail hook, like a venomous snake's fang, was an ideal vessel for injecting venom into its prey. It was like a poisonous super weapon. Liu Ming repeatedly made difficult and intensive evasive maneuvers against the Kangol beast's attacks. Each time he faced this terrifying monster's attack, Liu Ming was extremely nervous. He knew that, if he were pierced by the Kangol beast's venomous tail hook, even he would have no chance of survival, and would be killed instantly. The battle intensified, the Kangol beast's attacks becoming increasingly ferocious and violent. Scarlet blood splattered in the fierce battle, and energy attacks of various attributes, like a collision of ice and fire, continuously assaulted the center of the battle, where the Kangol beast lay. The Kangol beast, like a reckless tank, relied on its thick, sturdy, dark green scales to virtually ignore most attacks and simply charge in again and again. Any blood beast that stood in its way, regardless of strength, would be shattered beyond a single shred of bones. Their organs would also be shattered. Even some blood beasts with significantly lower defenses were instantly reduced to a heap of rotten flesh. Liu Ming, relying on his extraordinary agility and evasive abilities, narrowly avoided the Kangol beast's attacks. However, as he watched the blood beasts he had painstakingly summoned rapidly dwindle under the Kangol beast's reckless slaughter, Liu Ming's expression grew increasingly grim as he dodged the Kangol beast's deadly attacks. After his initial successful attack, he had vastly underestimated the terrifying erosion beast's true strength. Even if he had managed to injure the Kangol beast, it would have been foolish to assume he could defeat it. Based on that fact, each charge from the Kangol beast unleashed immense force. The thick-skinned blood beasts would be shattered to pieces by its impact. Even if he had stood in front of it, a head-on collision would have been fatal. Liu Ming had simply abandoned the idea of confronting the Kangol beast head-on. Whenever the blood beasts attacked with reckless abandon, he seized every opportunity to inflict new wounds on its majestic frame. But the Kangol beast was simply too strong. Aside from the initial blow to its abdomen, the other wounds had already begun to close before the blood had even begun to flow. However, the numerous wounds on the Kangol beast's body, oozing traces of blood from its dark green scales, showed that, even after withstanding his attacks, the terrifying monster was not as impassive as it appeared. Each minor injury inflicted on the Kangol beast came at the cost of several blood beasts tragically perishing under its attacks. Furthermore, the Kangol beast's physical strength was clearly far superior to Liu Ming's. Facing the Kangol beast's deadly attacks, Liu Ming was exhausted. Each intense evasion consumed a vast amount of energy, leaving him practically drained. Beyond the physical exhaustion, his spirit was also drained by the constant intense exertion. This battle, where every second could threaten one's life, was also extremely draining on Liu Ming's mental and emotional well-being. His greatest concern wasn't the constant attacks of the Kangol beast, but his nearly exhausted senses and physical strength. He would seize the moment when the Kangol beast attacked another blood beast, to unleash his most powerful attack, aiming for maximum damage. However, as the number of blood beast deaths increased, his physical and mental strength depleted. Liu Ming increasingly felt the impossibility of his wishful thinking, hoping to wear down the Kangol beast through grinding to death. The Kangol beast's physical strength and offensive power were truly formidable. His ability to barely break through its defenses was largely due to the Jufeng's evolution into a 9-star weapon. As for the extent of damage he could inflict, once his defenses were breached, it remained uncertain. Retreat. After careful consideration, Liu Ming decided to retreat. As a high-level erosion beast, the Kangol beast's power was simply too formidable. It was practically impossible to defeat it simply by sheer numbers. Meanwhile, the number of Liu Ming's terrestrial blood beasts had plummeted from over 100 since the start of the battle to no more than 50. Meanwhile, the Kangol beast remained as ferocious as ever, its power displaying no sign of diminishing. After careful consideration, Liu Ming decisively chose to retreat. Since he was certain he couldn't defeat this abnormal level Kangol beast for the time being, it was better to retreat than to continue suffering. Liu Ming leaped directly onto the back of a slender, yet incredibly fast blood beast. The blood beast carried him swiftly forward, while the Kanghook beast pursued Liu Ming with a frenzied predatory demeanor. Liu Ming groaned inwardly. If his remaining strength hadn't been so low, he'd probably have been able to fly much better with the flame dragon wing cloak. The blood beast suddenly gained some speed as the Kanghook beast pursued him, and Liu Ming, carrying him, wasn't a heavy burden to it. However, even with its impressive speed, the blood beast was still far inferior to the Kanghook beast. Even though the Kanghook beast wasn't a speed-focused corruption beast, or even a speed-conscious one, it was no match for a blood beast with the strength of a mere junior corruption beast. Swoosh. The Kanghook beast's deadly tail hook would occasionally catch up and sweep across. Liu Ming had to control the blood beast's flight, while also avoiding the relentless barrage of its deadly tail hooks. He was completely exhausted. Even though Liu Ming could dodge the tail hook behind him, the blood beast he sat on was still slightly less agile under his control. The blood beast narrowly avoided the attack with several sweeps, but on the last one, the tip of the dark purple tail hook slashed hard into the blood beast. The blood beast flew away with a puff, and Liu Ming, sitting on its back, rolled sideways and landed steadily. He glanced back at his unfortunate mount, which had been swept by the dark tail hook. He saw that the part of the mount that had been swept by the black tail hook had begun to blacken and rot. Before he could summon another blood beast to serve as a mount, the blood beast rushed over frantically. Liu Ming had no choice but to run for his life. Chapter 245, Life-Saving Cave, a critical moment. However, Liu Ming was already exhausted. Even if he were in perfect condition, how could he possibly be a match for this Kangao beast? The Kangao beast wasn't the most powerful among the erosion beasts, but within the ruins of the Night Crown ancient ruins, it was undoubtedly a formidable predator. Few monsters dared to provoke a frenzied Kangao beast alone. Desperate, Liu Ming could only forcefully channel his inner Yuan Qi, once again activating the flame dragon wings of his flame dragon wing cloak. A brilliant trail of crimson flames instantly unfurled, and Liu Ming's wings spread. However, due to his depleted Yuan Qi, summoning the flame dragon wings this time was a struggle. Even the wings he summoned felt ethereal, lacking the solidity of previous ones. Nevertheless, Liu Ming's speed surged again, and the distance he had been rapidly closing with the Kangao beast slowly closed. However, this wasn't a long-term solution. His Yuan Qi simply couldn't sustain him in a race for his life against the Kangao beast. If he continued in this relentless pursuit, he would be completely exhausted and torn to pieces by the time he stopped. As Liu Ming fled, he observed the terrain he passed, trying to find something that would allow him to escape the clutches of this damned Kangao beast. Finally, there was a way out. The flame dragon wings behind Liu Ming were already flickering, and less than a minute had passed since he lost all his vital energy. A change appeared in Liu Ming's sight. It was a hill to the side and ahead. It was just a low-looking mound, composed entirely of solid rock. Atop the mound, a cave barely wide enough for two people to pass side by side came into view. Seeing this mound, Liu Ming knew his chance had come. While the Kangao beast wasn't huge, that was only relative. Compared to monsters that could be 10 meters long and 2 or 3 stories tall, it wasn't huge, but compared to an average human, it was still a massive beast. It was 2 men tall, 7 or 8 meters long, slender, and powerful, with claws as large as a man's face and a thick, powerful tail. Judging by the shape and size of the cave entrance alone, Liu Ming was immediately certain the Kangao beast couldn't get in, but he could. Having been separated from the blood beast army, running on now would be disastrous. The only viable option was to rush into the cave for temporary shelter, awaiting other developments. With this in mind, the speed of the flame dragon's wings behind Liu Ming suddenly increased. Its speed increased instantaneously, even though the flame dragon's wings were flickering, and it was obvious they wouldn't last long. This brief burst of speed still allowed it to pull nearly 100 meters ahead of the Kangao beast. Closer, closer. Liu Ming was no more than 500 meters from the cave, in trance on the hill. For a transcendent of his caliber, this was a matter of mere blinks. Roar, roar, roar. Just when Liu Ming thought he was seconds away from the Kangao beast's pursuit, a momentary reprieve. The dark yellow pupils of the Kangao beast suddenly turned blood red. Then, with a few leaps, Its four incredibly sturdy legs flexed slightly, and with a few bounds, it caught up with Liu Ming, even leaping dozens of meters in front of him, roaring frantically. Seeing this, Liu Ming couldn't help but realize that this was the cannibal beast's bloodthirsty and frenzied nature. He hadn't expected this creature to pursue him so frantically. Liu Ming gave a wry smile, thinking he should have never provoked this creature. He was now in a difficult position. He summoned his last remaining wisp of energy, boosting the speed of his flame dragon wing cloak to its limit, attempting to charge directly into the cave in trance. However, the cannibal beast wouldn't let Liu Ming succeed so easily. Its blood-red eyes fixed on him, filled with a chilling frenzy. Suddenly, the chirping of birds echoed through the sky. Liu Ming's army of flying blood beasts had arrived just in time, launching a suicidal attack on the cannibal beast like moths to a flame. Behind Liu Ming, a continuous thud echoed. He knew that each thud meant at least one flying blood beast had fallen to the cannibal beast's attack. But he didn't turn back, and now he couldn't. He rushed straight into the cave, in trance on the solid rocky hill. The moment he entered the cave, he ordered the flying blood beast that had nearly saved his life to retreat. But less than a third of the flying blood beasts successfully retreated from the cannibal beast's attack. Within the few breaths of rushing into the cave, more than a dozen blood beasts were killed. Inside the cave, Liu Ming's face was gloomy and terrifying. Thud. From outside the cave in trance, deafening, powerful crashes echoed relentlessly. This was naturally the cannibal beast trying to break in and capture Liu Ming, the creature that had caused its rage. However, with its size, entering was nearly impossible. Furthermore, a cave tens of meters deep was too deep for the cannibal beast to breach with brute force alone. He hadn't expected his miscalculation to lead to such a heavy loss of his blood beasts. He was safe for now, but a far more dire situation awaited him. If the cannibal beast had any intelligence left, it knew that Liu Ming would eventually escape if it remained at the cave in trance. This was Liu Ming's anxiety, as it meant his next encounter with the cannibal beast would be a fierce battle. If he couldn't defeat it, his escape was uncertain. He didn't expect his luck to be so good, as if he would be saved at the critical moment. After much deliberation, he realized that the only thing that could improve his strength now was the large piece of spiritual crystal he hadn't used since obtaining it from the yellow sandworm nest. This crystal was currently being held by Ming. Perhaps because the entire crystal was composed of the purest spiritual substance, he discovered by chance that Ming had actually stored it in his heroic spirit space. This greatly eased Liu Ming's suffering from having to constantly carry around this incredibly heavy piece, more than a man's height. However, it was precisely because of this placement within the heroic spirit space that Liu Ming, in his constant exploration of the ruins, gradually forgot about the treasure that had astonished him upon its initial discovery. He reasoned that ectoplasm energy had the greatest effect on spiritual beings, and his only spiritual being was the heroic spirit Ming. However, Ming had already advanced twice, and it was no longer advisable to increase his power again. A sudden surge in strength wasn't necessarily a good thing. But now, trapped in a desperate situation, he couldn't afford to worry too much. Furthermore, Ming wasn't the only one who could absorb ectoplasm. He himself could as well. He wanted to test the potential of such an incredibly pure spiritual substance, to see the transformation it could bring to his own mental power. Chapter 246, The Beginning of Thoughts, The Final Battle, Part 1. Long before Liu Ming devoured and absorbed the two Lord Brain crystals from the Lord-type cannibal corpses, he had already awakened some rudimentary uses of his mental power. For example, the ability to manipulate the three mutant cannibal corpses was controlled by this awakened mental power. From the cave in trance, waves of intense pounding continued to echo. The cannibal beast, with its seemingly boundless stamina, had not given up its pursuit of Liu Ming. Anyone standing on the hilltop could feel the earth trembling, let alone Liu Ming, who had taken refuge in the cave. The loud pounding noises were clearly the cannibal beast's terrifying destructive power attempting to break into the cave. However, the cave Liu Ming was hiding in was clearly not large enough to accommodate the cannibal beast's massive body, making it impossible for it to enter for a while. However, this did not mean Liu Ming could rest easy. His safety was only temporary. Given the Kangal beast's tendency and speed in destroying the cave in trance, Liu Ming would sooner or later fall into its clutches. He sat down on the ground and placed his upper hand on the astonishingly large transparent crystal before him. A wisp of spiritual power, wrapped in primordial energy, attempted to penetrate this vast body of energy. Boom. As Liu Ming's spiritual power penetrated the crystal wall and entered the crystal, an indescribable shock washed over him, like waves and tides, relentlessly and intensely impacting his mind. The moment his spiritual power entered the crystal wall, it felt like a drop of water merging into the vastness of the ocean. Within the massive crystal, lying flat on the ground, barely taller than Liu Ming himself, was a mysterious transparent flocculent substance. As Liu Ming's spiritual power came into contact with this transparent flock, it absorbed it like a moth to a flame. His spiritual power, seemingly infinitesimal amidst the vast sea of spiritual matter, instantly experienced a substantial increase in strength after incorporating this first clump of mysterious flocks. The intensity, breadth, and overall volume of his spiritual power increased by 30-40% the instant the mysterious substance merged. Furthermore, this fusion was virtually seamless, as natural as a drop of water merging into a pond. Liu Ming was ecstatic. The spiritual energy previously fused with Kamengwen pales in comparison to this. Even the crystals from the purple soul corpse demon Kamengwen had previously absorbed, the same unit of spiritual matter, was several orders of magnitude lower than this mysterious crystal. If the spiritual energy Kamengwen had previously absorbed could only be considered low grade, the spiritual matter he absorbed this time was definitely of a higher order. Simply absorbing a small clump of spiritual flocculent matter increased Liu Ming's mental power by 30-40%. And this tiny clump of flocculent matter was an insignificant fraction in this vast world, like a sea of clouds. A mad thought suddenly crossed Liu Ming's mind. If he absorbed all the flocculent matter in the crystal, his mental power would reach an extremely terrifying level. However, he quickly abandoned this seemingly good idea. Even if his head exploded, it would be impossible to absorb such a large crystal in such a short time. Liu Ming continued to channel his spiritual power through the crystal ocean, the wisps of primordial energy it controlled acting as a bridge and medium between the spiritual matter and his body. As time passed, Liu Ming's spiritual power continued to soar. The spiritual power within Liu Ming's mind, previously invisible and formless, was strangely imbued with a hint of spiritual matter's properties as it continuously fused and strengthened with the flocculent spiritual matter. This formless spiritual power was originally impossible to observe or capture, but as it began to atomize and take on a flocculent form, Liu Ming could clearly sense wisps of tangible spiritual power, like mist, emerging within his mind. However, this mist only made up a small portion of the entire spiritual power ocean. The majority remained in its original formless state. The purpose of this atomized spiritual power was a question that lingered in Liu Kuo's mind. Never pausing for a moment, Liu Ming sat cross-legged, motionless, as if in a state of deep meditation, deep in the pitch-black cavern, oblivious to the thunderous roars of the Kangal beast destroying the cave in trance. More and more invisible spiritual energy, transformed into mist within Liu Ming's mind, grew. These spiritual energy strands were a pale silver, each delicate yet as strong as steel wire. Boom. With Liu Ming at the center, a sudden storm suddenly erupted in the dark cavern. Countless dust and debris floated in the air, as if devoid of gravity. Then, completely freed from the restraints of the storm's center, the storm, like a true hurricane, instantly swept across the surrounding area. Liu Ming's closed eyes suddenly opened, a flicker of excitement and joy in them. He had been trapped in the cave for over 2 days. During these 2 days, countless, almost predatory absorptions of the spiritual crystals had resulted in a qualitative improvement and transformation of his spiritual power. Those silver mists of spiritual power had already successfully occupied half of his mind sea. With every movement, these silver mists, whose color and substance only he could discern, would burst forth, attaching themselves to any part of his body, even to his organs, instantly and significantly enhancing that part's attributes. For example, toughness, resistance to blows, strength, agility. Liu Ming's memories contained records of this direct manifestation of spiritual power. This was likely an extremely rare application. On Earth, Even 10 years after the apocalypse, there were only a handful of transcendent professionals capable of such manipulation. If he hadn't been almost certain he had mastered that mysterious ability, he would have been incredulous. Telekinesis. This was the ultimate application of spiritual power. Telekinesis, also known as telekinesis, refers to the power of a single thought. Wherever a thought reaches, it becomes telekinesis. The strength of one's mental power is its foundation. A powerful telekineticist could even crush tall buildings with their bare hands, and devastate cities with their bare hands, even using telekinesis to achieve supersonic flight. This was already a method worthy of a demon god. From memory, such individuals were called telekinetic masters. Of those who knew of, or heard of, such telekinetic masters, there were no more than 5 of them combined. And each one was a powerful figure who guarded a region, a true superpower among humans. Chapter 247, The Beginning of Telekinesis, The Final Battle, Part 2. Furthermore, the rise of numerous telekinesis masters laid a foundation and system for its cultivation. Various methods of telekinesis gradually became visible to ordinary transcendent professionals. Telekinesis, this mysterious form of mental power, is most powerful, not only because it can reach any point at will. Its alternative name, telekinesis, describes this characteristic. With sufficient mental power, a person's thoughts can enhance telekinesis wherever they reach, or even directly launch telekinetic attacks. However, the reason why telekinesis has become so popular, and even why every transcendent who masters and reaches the pinnacle of power can achieve supreme power, is not solely due to this one characteristic. Another equally astonishing characteristic of telekinesis is its ability to imbue mental power with a myriad of attributes. Incredible powers such as cold, heat, thunder, lightning, and darkness can all be purposefully imbued into mental power through various telekinesis techniques. This means that, when you battle a telekinetic master, you might discover that they possess not only fire and frost abilities, but also profound mastery of thunder, storms, light, and darkness, among other abilities. Being able to adapt your mental power to different powerful attributes according to the needs of the battle and the environment is a prerequisite for a qualified telekineticist. Liu Ming never imagined that he could awaken this rare ability. He clasped his fingers together and grasped the air, a stream of scorching heat appearing in his palm. He then repeated the same with his other hand, a chilling aura gathering within. He knew he was already a beginner in telekinesis. This path would likely be a long one. Telekinetic practitioners almost always have a master, and his own journey would be arduous. But he also knew that awakening telekinesis, at the very least, represented a passport to true power. As far as he could remember, he had never heard of a telekineticist whose power level was lower than the 5th level. In other words, as long as he didn't perish midway, his continuous cultivation of telekinesis and the continuous improvement of his skills would almost certainly allow him to reach the 5th level transcendent realm. This level is known as a nirvana semi-saint, a pillar of a large region. At this level, even after the apocalyptic catastrophe in the dazzling 10 years, he would still be a truly powerful being respected and followed by the major powers. Liu Ming couldn't care less as he watched the spiritual crystals before him, which had already lost about 1/6 of their value. He summoned Kang and had him absorb the remaining spiritual matter with him. Although his mental power had increased by more than 10 times compared to 2 days ago, and he had even awakened and mastered the most basic and elementary uses of telekinesis, this knowledge had not yet translated into actual combat effectiveness. Now was not the time to confront the Kangal beast guarding the corpse outside. As soon as Kang was summoned from the heroic spirit dimension, he gazed at the ectoplasm crystals with a frenzy. He had long coveted these spiritual substances, but since Liu Ming hadn't spoken, he dared not touch them. Now that Liu Ming had summoned him to absorb them, how could he be polite? His entire body radiated a dazzling deep green light, frantically sweeping towards the ectoplasm crystals, pouring into the crystal walls and absorbing them. Liu Ming paused his thoughts and continued to extract spiritual substances from the ectoplasm crystals, strengthening his mental power and reconstructing his telekinetic structure. 3 more days passed, and the meager food and water Liu Ming had brought with him were completely depleted. Fortunately, as a transcendent, his needs for food and water were significantly reduced compared to ordinary people. Otherwise, his meager food and water wouldn't have lasted him 5 days. The ectoplasm crystals before Liu Ming had also shrunk significantly, shrinking from more than a person's height to the size of a human head. The green light emanating from Mengwen was so intense it blinded anyone. Strange patterns began to appear on his muscular frame. Within the green light, Mengwen's wooden staff underwent another astonishing transformation. Already covered in branches and leaves, it now grew even more, even bearing emerald green langan-sized exotic fruits. Liu Ming, supported by an invisible force, floated in mid-air. Countless rocks and dust rose up around him, swirling around like a vortex. Bang! After a resounding explosion, Mengwen was the first to leave his cultivation state. The countless green lights surrounding him suddenly exploded, transforming into countless green starlight beams that struck the surrounding stone walls of the cave. Fortunately, these streams of green light had no lethality, otherwise not only would the stone walls be riddled with holes, Liu Ming, completely defenseless and still in deep cultivation, might have been shattered to pieces by Mengwen's unconscious actions. Mengwen emerged from the dazzling green light, a changed figure. If the handsome old heroic spirit had always held the illusion of a floating ghost, now, aside from the green aura swirling around his body, he looked indistinguishable from a living being. His previously draped green robes were replaced with a shrouding, dark green armor. The pattern on this armor mirrored the same pattern that had swirled around Mengwen in the green light. Just by looking at the appearance of this green armor, few would have mistaken it for anything ordinary. Mengwen's aura was several notches stronger than before. Wow. Liu Ming's clothes and hair moved without a gust of wind. An invisible force emanated from him, clanging against the surrounding rock walls like a hurricane sweeping across a seaside cliff. Liu Ming opened his eyes, a pair brimming with magical power. His dark pupils now glowed silver, a breathtaking sight. Around him, tiny particles of matter swirled. Streams of light, flames, frost, and thunderbolts appeared one after another, a sight to behold. Liu Ming waved his hand and headed for the cave entrance. It's time to settle accounts with the Kangal beast. His tone was filled with overwhelming confidence. Mengwen quickly followed, knowing it was time to leave. Liu Ming was brimming with confidence. After absorbing the last tiny piece of spiritual crystal, his telekinesis had become at least 3 times stronger than when it was first created. By this point, the combat power generated by his telekinesis had reached a considerable scale, and it was time to leave. Furthermore, the spiritual crystal had completely depleted its spiritual energy and disappeared, so staying any longer was pointless. Chapter 248, The Disappearing Person, Fortress of Ashes. Wuling City. At the site of the former Wuling railway station, ordinary houses and other structures were largely demolished. A vast expanse of orange-red buildings rose in their place, rising one after another in a continuous, unbroken row. Each building, either closely connected or intersecting, resembled a military bunker. Ultimately, an elliptical wall stretching for countless meters encircles the complex, forming a unique architectural complex. If there's one common denominator among these buildings, it's their solidity. Their vibrant colors reveal patterns resembling those of fine iron and rock, creating an impression of unparalleled indestructibility. Yet, this sense of solidity also harbors a menacing aura. According to the law of the jungle, the brighter the color, the more deadly it is. In the center of this complex lies a dense forest, a puzzling phenomenon. While any complex typically has a central core, this fortress-like structure is centered on a unique forest of towering trees. Within this forest, figures can be vaguely seen. In the center of the forest, inside the tallest treehouse, sat a massive circular log conference table, 5 or 6 meters in diameter. A group of people gathered around it. Marjan and Gong Weekson occupied the 2 wooden chairs in the back. Others, such as Chu Gang, Gu Yun, Yun Fanghua, Liu Huchun, and Fangan, who had been following Elder Liu Ming closely, took their seats. Wu Zhangyan, Qin Yu, and Gong Ruohan, rising stars from the team, were also present. No fewer than 20 people sat around the table, the core of this survivor gathering. Yet, at the very top, a prominent seat lay vacant. That position, once held by a most important individual, remained untouched even after their disappearance. I believe everyone is well aware of the recent situation. The altar has been leaked by an insider. Not to mention those far away, the dozens of individuals, both large and small, in the west of the city are probably on the verge of collapse. Marjan spoke first, breaking the silence. His voice remained calm, yet a hint of murderous intent lingered within. Liu Huchuan snorted coldly at this, his face icy as he spoke. It's said that the Sandstorm Gang is the most active. Since the boss left, Lu Zuan of the Sandstorm Gang has been using the conflict in the secret realm as an excuse to target us several times. The Port Legion Dao chuckled, cracking his knuckles. That depends on whether he has good teeth. Since he transitioned to an inch force fighter, leveraging his foundation as a provincial runner-up, he's quickly distinguished himself among the new professionals. Not only has he cured his years of lameness, but he's also become a formidable fighter. Through a series of battles, he's risen to the top 10 of the Ash Castle's experts. Ultimately, he became a core member of the team, eligible to attend core meetings. His words ignited the rest of the group, all united in their hatred for the Sandstorm Gang. Qin Yu, who was previously in charge of logistics, raised his hand slightly, signaling for everyone to calm down. Thanks to his exceptional management skills and Gong Weixin's lack of interest in management, he naturally became the team's second in command, second only to Ma Jun. However, Ma Jun was solely responsible for military affairs, leaving all other duties to Qin Yu. Qin Yu lived up to his position, earning him the nickname Qin Yu Yandao the Dark Blade, a reputation known throughout much of Wuling City. He had murdered many a victim. He smiled with satisfaction as he observed the crowd's shared hatred for a common enemy. He concluded, everyone's morale is high, but we need to focus on more than just the Sandstorm Society. The four-color altar. According to current intelligence, we are the only one in the entire Wuling region, aside from the military and the Wuling Coexistence Society, who possess it. It's definitely not just the Sandstorm Society that's jealous. Besides, Zuluan alone isn't enough to warrant such a major effort. I'm afraid all 9 of the top factions west of the city are targeting us, he said, his expression growing even colder. If we want to preserve the little legacy left by the boss, I'm afraid we'll have to think things over. Gong Ruohan asked, what about Mountain City Transport and Hurricane Castle? What have they said? She was no longer as naive as before. The trials and tribulations she had endured since Liu Ming's disappearance had given her a hint of his sister's cold determination. HMPH. Let's not talk about those bastards. Before Qin Yu could say anything, Chu Gang spoke up, his anger evident in his deep rage against the two organizations. He took a deep breath and continued, Leo Ma and Leo Qin sent me to the two organizations' strongholds last time to negotiate for an alliance and aid. My brothers and I were nearly devoured by them. In my opinion, these guys are no different from the Sandstorm Society. They allied with us before because they were forced to do so. Now they've revealed their true wolfish nature. Mountain City Transport is Wuling's largest company. In the apocalypse, it has become a powerful force thanks to the large trucks in its parking lot and its team of truck drivers. Their primary area of activity is the west of the city. Aside from the survivors, who have relocated to the East Safe Zone, the remaining organizations active in the non-safe zones are all characterized by their strength and power. Even the East Safe Zone doesn't dare to overly pressure these organizations. As for Hurricane Fort, it's a gathering place centered around Zeduo Heng, a renowned and powerful evolver in Wuling who wields the power of hurricanes, and, in peacetime, worked as a security company cashier. As a core group, he and other members of the same security company formed a gathering place. Because they came from the security company, most of the members were not only skilled, but also possessed some firearms. This gave them a significant advantage at the beginning of the apocalypse, allowing them to quickly develop into a considerable force. The term fort has also recently become popular. The smallest gathering places of survivors are often called bases, while larger ones are called fortresses, or simply forts. This term describes a complex of defensive structures with solid walls, like a castle or fortress. The gathering place, centered around the treehouse plaza surrounded by a wall of ash, is called Ash Fort. Smaller ones are called small forts, while larger ones are called large forts. Ash Castle, with its gathering of only 10,000 survivors, was considered a small castle. However, its strength and combat effectiveness rivaled those of larger castles, if not surpassed them. As for Hurricane Castle, controlled by Zediohang, one of the 3 larger castles west of the city, it was so formidable that even the military was reluctant to provoke it in the non-safe zone. However, even with 20,000 to 30,000 survivors, Hurricane Castle was no match for Ash Castle. Chapter 249 Hurricane Fort, Pre-War Mobilization. Hurricane Fort's combatants are primarily composed of Hurricane Teammate, comprised primarily of users with special abilities, and Hunter Team, comprised primarily of warriors skilled in the manipulation of firearms and firearms. Hurricane Teammate is divided into 8 subgroups, all composed of members who have achieved either class advancement or natural awakening. This totals 200 to 300 members. The Hunter Team, on the other hand, numbers over 1,000, all equipped with powerful weapons, and possessing considerable combat experience. Conversely, Ash Fort's esoteric strength lies in its 13 Iron Guards, comprised solely of users with special abilities, which number 600 to 700, with an average of around 50 members per team. The 13 Iron Guards are derived from the 13 search teams created by the 13 captains appointed by Liu Ming before his disappearance. With the exception of Captain Zhao Chen, who died in a monster attack, and was succeeded by Wu Zhangyan, the remaining 12 captains remain in their original roles. The Steelheart Iron Guard, led by Steelheart Knight Fangan, is the strongest and most formidable. The members of the Steelheart Iron Guard are all evolutionists of the 2nd evolutionary class or higher, and they are the largest of the 13 Iron Guards, numbering a full 73. The remaining combatants, who have not yet evolved, but have passed the rigorous Crazy Fist 8 styles training and assessment, are assigned to the Iron Guard's reserve garrison, where they are trained as quasi-evolutionists. They are responsible for guarding Ashford, and providing support during forage and combat missions. These garrison guards number over 2,000, representing 1/5 of Ashford's total population. Given the sheer size and strength of their combatants, Hurricane Fort appears as weak as a child before a strong adult. However, this time, Ashford's enemies extend beyond Hurricane Fort. The 9 forts to the west of the city, as well as the Lingping district in the east, Feng district in the north, Zuon district in the south, and even the various forces in the city center, are likely to arrive upon hearing the news. If these forces, scattered across Wuling, since the military's withdrawal, were to unite, they could even withstand a formidable challenge from the eastern safety zone, let alone Ashford itself. The Wuling Coexistence Association, as the leader of all survivor organizations in Wuling besides the military, possessed a 4-color altar. While this attracted the attention of various factions, no one considered it inappropriate or sought to exploit it. The Wuling Coexistence Association's 80,000 to 90,000 survivors alone provided them with a vastly superior backup force, not to mention their nearly 10,000 combatants. The fact that Ash Castle, a small fortress with a population of barely 10,000, possessed a 4-color altar, a highly coveted location, was a source of intense concern for all factions. This was the reason for the emergency meeting. The 9 forts in the West City consisted of 9 smaller forts, led by Sandstorm Fort, the headquarters of the Sandstorm Society. Ash Castle, the 10th fort beyond the 9 and the Kang district, was a fortress comparable in strength to the Sandstorm Society. Ash Castle, its neighbor, the Iron Fist Society's smaller fort, depended on Ash Castle for its survival. However, the recent disappearance of the 4-color altar, controlled by Ash Castle, has spread widely, and Iron Fist Castle, instigated by ambitious individuals, has begun to stir. Their previously subservient attitude toward Ash Castle has undergone a complete about-face. Marjan spoke up. Captains, please first share what your respective monitoring organizations have been up to lately. Liu Huchuan was the first to speak. The Sandstorm Society is still actively mobilizing behind the scenes, constantly instigating other forces to attack us. Chu Gang then angrily declared, the Hurricane Society and Mountain City Transport are feigning compliance while secretly disloyal. If we hope to gain their assistance, they'll definitely stab us in the back. Fang Yuan and Li Kangsang also briefly outlined the activities of the forces they were responsible for monitoring. In short, the 9 forts in West City's Kang district were gathering around Ash Castle like a pack of wolves, ready to launch an attack at any moment, led by their leader. However, after hearing each other's accounts, not a single fear emerged from the eyes of the 20 or so people present. Even Gong Ruohan, a young girl employed as a support professional, had eyes burning with fighting spirit, not the slightest fear of the 9 forts of West City, the 9 most powerful factions among the dozens of independent organizations in Wulin Kang district. It seems the 9 forts are sharpening their knives against us. Ma Jun's eyes flashed with a cold glint. He continued, unfortunately, we are not pigs or sheep, but tigers and wolves that choose their prey. Next, I will begin deploying the battle plan. Each captain will lead his Iron Guard and subordinate garrison to complete the task. During Liu Ming's absence, Ma Jun oversaw all military operations at Ash Fort, gradually demonstrating his exceptional command ability. Although he was merely a vanguard soldier within the army, within Ash Fort, he was a reputable military commander. The Iron Guard captain's mission is to launch a blanket, indiscriminate strike against 13 of the Sandstorm Society's West City strongholds. These are the maps of their locations. With a wave of his hand, Ma Jun emitted a multicolored light from the special instrument on his wrist, forming a 3-dimensional map similar to a sand table on the giant circular table. There were 15 locations marking the Sandstorm Society's logo. Ma Jun began assigning the task of eliminating each stronghold to each Iron Guard captain. Each of the 12 Iron Guard captains, with the exception of Steelhut Knight Fangen, the leader of the Steelhut Iron Guard, was assigned the task of eliminating one stronghold. Jinsi Dao and Luo Yingren each led their forces to attack 2 other strongholds. Fangen, however, was assigned the most arduous task. Fangen, lead the Steelhut Iron Guard and your subordinates in harassing and attacking the Sandstorm Society headquarters and Sandstorm Fort. Make sure to prevent Lu Zuan from supporting the various strongholds. Ma Jun looked at Fangen seriously and added, among all the Iron Guard captains, no one except you can directly confront Lu Zuan, so please. Fangen nodded gravely. The Sandstorm Society headquarters had no fewer than 1,000 men remaining, while his own Steelhut Iron Guard numbered only 73. Together with his reserve Steelhut Guard, there were only about 200 men. This mission was undoubtedly daunting. As for me and Gong Weeksin, we will lead half of the remaining combatants to launch harassment attacks on the other 8 of the 9 forts in West City, preventing them from merging with the Sandstorm Society. Qin Yu will lead half of the remaining combatants, along with Ji Zhenrong, Su Mi, and Arfei, to defend Ash Fort. Speed is of the essence in war. Act. Everyone, remember this blitzkrieg must be swift and decisive. We must not allow the enemy any breathing space. With that, the cavalry announced the meeting's end, and the Iron Guard captains returned to their respective units for pre-war mobilization. Although only around 200 combatants remained in Ash Fort, no one expressed any concern for their base. 3 terrifying behemoths lurked deep within Ash Fort. As long as they remained, even the combined forces of the 9 forts would be powerless against Ash Fort in a short period of time. 2 chapters to go, the 3rd to come later. Chapter 250, Telekinetic Bombs, Indiscriminate Bombardment. Amidst the ancient ruins of Night Crown, a cave nestled in a rubbled mountain remained dim and dark. Liu Ming led Kai Mengwen toward the cave in trance, emanating a powerful invisible aura. Countless miniature whirlwinds emanated and vanished around him. Kai Mengwen, clutching a strange staff resembling a small tree, followed closely behind him, his green armor dotted with green starlight. Even though Liu Ming had absorbed 2/3 of the spiritual energy contained within the entire crystal, it only enhanced his mental power, not his physical form. While his energy level remained at the peak of C class, his mental strength was astonishing. He hadn't yet fully mastered his entire being, and the vortex of psychic energy he leaked out was astonishing even for Kai Mengwen, who had already successfully evolved to S class. The deadly destructive power contained in these mental storms terrified even Kai Mengwen. Upon reaching the cave in trance, they were met with a scene of devastation. Stones littered the path, nearly blocking the path. The entrance, which should have been 10 meters away, stretched out 10 meters into the cavern. The cave was wrecked by an overwhelming force, using the most brutal means. The 10-meter long cavern was completely destroyed, leaving it practically exposed. Countless shattered rocks and earth nearly buried the cave in trance. A terrifying aura loomed outside. Liu Ming, expressionless, raised his hand and gently grasped the rock that blocked his path. Suddenly, as if a powerful bomb had been placed in the rock mass and detonated, a powerful explosion unleashed a shockwave and a shower of rocks, hurtling towards Liu Ming and Kaimengwen. Just as Kaimengwen was about to step forward to block Liu Ming, an elliptical invisible telekinetic shield unfolded before him. Countless rubble and shockwaves collided with the shield, creating visible ripples like water. None of the attacks directly struck Liu Ming or Kaimengwen. As the dust from the explosion gradually dissipated, the pile of rock and earth blocking the cave entrance was cleared, and a passage littered with fragments of stone appeared before Liu Ming. Suddenly, something strange happened. A sharp, dark blue claw, as big as a wash basin, swooped down on Liu Ming and the others. In a flash, ripple spread across the invisible telekinetic shield, and the entire shield threatened to collapse. The immense force contained in the attacking claws surpassed the shield's defense limit. However, Liu Ming remained expressionless, staring intently at the incoming attack. Within his consciousness, a vast amount of mental energy was rapidly transforming into telekinesis, adding to the already crumbling telekinetic shield. The shield's impending collapse was instantly halted. Even Liu Ming himself didn't know the current strength of his telekinesis. He only knew that, in terms of mental power alone, even his memory of himself 10 years after the apocalypse couldn't compare. This kind of immense mental power was unprecedented, having only been heard of in rumors. Even the 5th level Nirvana semi-saints he had met didn't possess such immense mental power. With this surge of mental power, his own abilities regarding mental power had also undergone a terrifying enhancement. He believed that, in terms of his mind control abilities alone, he surpassed, if not surpassed, those of the first tier, A-grade Lord type mutants he had encountered. After 3 consecutive attacks, the beast's claws failed to shatter the telekinetic shield, and finally gave up temporarily. However, as Liu Ming saw it retreat, he knew its recharged attack would intensify. Taking advantage of the moment when the majority of the Kangal beast's body remained exposed, with only one claw extended, its torso looming outside the cave in trance, Liu Ming drew out his absolute blade, pressed his heel against the ground, and thrust forward. Layers of grey, sinister flame enveloped the blade. Beyond the eerie grey flames, a terrifying, invisible force slowly infused the blade. The Kangal beast, as if sensing the danger, suddenly retracted its massive body, attempting to dodge the terrifying blow. Seeing the Kangal beast's retreat, Liu Ming stomped his foot on the ground again, instantly increasing his speed. A powerful thrust of telekinesis simultaneously propelled him forward, and his form shifted like a phantom, a wave of air surging behind him. Puff! The Kangal beast ultimately failed to dodge the blow. The blade's tip pierced its broad, thick chest. The scales it had once prided itself on seemed as fragile as paper. However, the penetrating wound inflicted was clearly not fatal to the massive Kangal beast. The Kangal beast watched the creature that had stabbed it, now leaving the cave, its eyes filled with madness. Completely ignoring its wounds, its fang-filled maw opened, biting down at Liu Ming. Liu Ming drew his blade and retreated. Fueled by telekinesis, he moved with ghostly speed, dodging the Kangal beast's bite. Why? A flicker of confusion crossed the Kangal beast's eyes. It wasn't puzzled by the creature's ability to dodge its attack, but by the strange subtle pain that slowly surfaced in its wound after the blade had been withdrawn. Just now, the tip of the knife pierced its body, but it didn't feel much pain. Years of fighting had numbed its pain receptors. The only injuries it felt were usually fatal. It no longer cared about Liu Ming, slowly lowering its massive, ferocious head to look at its chest. Wisps of strange grey flames continued to burn at the wound, while countless cyan energies within the Kangal beast's body continuously attacked the grey flames, trying to extinguish them. Why wouldn't this grey flame die out? Throughout its long life, the Kangal beast had encountered all sorts of strange creatures, including many with fire attributes. But this strange flame, clinging to its body and burning continuously, was the first it had encountered. However, this flame was not fatal. The Kangal beast's energy level was far superior to Liu Ming's. Even though the Ash Ember Fire's attack was strange, it shrank like a flame in the wind under the impact of the Kangal beast's life energy. It seemed only a matter of time before it was extinguished. Bang! A soft crack echoed from the wound of the Kangal beast. Though quiet, the destructive force it contained was astonishing. The telekinesis clinging to the ashen flames exploded like a deadly reaper. The storm of telekinesis was like a blade, instantly slicing through the Kangal beast's flesh and tearing it to the bone. This was identical to the telekinetic explosion that had just blasted open the cave in trance, only with a far more bizarre and sinister effect. The telekinetic bomb was Liu Ming's first application of telekinesis. It encapsulated mental energy, spinning and compressing it like an air bomb, before finally detonating it. As it spun, the mental energy formed a spiral structure with sharp razor-sharp edges. In the telekinetic explosion, these compressed edges shattered into deadly fragments, sweeping everything in its path. Looking at the Kangal beast before him, its chest a bloody mess, its bones bared, Liu Ming knew it had lost its fighting power. With a single movement of his mind, hundreds of evil dragon spells pierced the air, piercing the Kangal beast with a whooshing sound. In the past, the limit of Liu Ming's physical energy reserves was only enough to support him to launch hundreds of attacks with the most powerful evil dragon curse power. But he could never blast out all at once without stopping, like he does now. After his mental power was horrifically improved, he could already use mental control to achieve hundreds of waves of evil dragon curse power. In a series of chain explosions, the Kangal beast roared wildly with fear and anger. When the chain explosions stopped, a bloody figure lay motionless in the billowing smoke and dust. I fell asleep when I was almost finishing the third chapter yesterday, and now I'm uploading it to everyone. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.